Chapter 3358. Waves of coercion rolled out. Yi Shiwen was like the spokesperson of the heavenly way who walked in the world. All the emperor lords who were watching also knew that from today onwards, there would be another supreme heavenly master in this world. They just felt that the speed of heavenly masters emerging recently was too fast. In the past, there might not be a heavenly master emerging in hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, or even tens of millions of years. But recently, the heaven-devouring Demon King and Yi Shiwen had achieved the way and become heavenly masters. However, it was nothing when they thought about it, because the heaven-devouring Demon King had already died in the hands of Yi Shiwen. Before he achieved the way, he was already able to kill the heaven-devouring Demon King. Now that he had become a heavenly master, how could it be? Many experienced veteran emperor lords had seen many heavenly masters who had completed their tribulations, but they only felt that none of them had such terrifying power. Indeed, as they had imagined, Yi Shiwen was not comparable to ordinary heavenly masters at all. Although he had just succeeded in crossing the tribulations, he had completely consolidated his realm cultivation and reached a small peak in one fell swoop, as if he was at the peak of a realm. Yi Shiwen was also prepared for this. He had prepared for so long before crossing the tribulations, and it was also so difficult when crossing the tribulations. If his cultivation did not advance by leaps and bounds after crossing the tribulations, it would not be justifiable. The heavenly way rewarded the diligent. This basic point had never changed. The more you put in, the more success you might reap in the end. He felt that he was simply unprecedentedly powerful. As far as the eye could see, there were rules and rules intertwining. Everything was so clear in front of him, and the world had never been so clear in front of him. This was the advantage brought by breaking through to another limit. It was a completely different domain, a completely different world. At this realm, he did not have to worry about being casually discarded like a chess piece, and the human race behind him would also obtain great benefits. It would not be difficult to become the 11th strongest race. Moreover, his status in the human race would also become supreme. This wasn't the first time that he had encountered such a thing. He had already experienced it once in the myriad heavens. He had brought the human race to a supreme realm in the myriad heavens and realms. Now, it was just a reenactment of everything. In fact, there were even some differences. This was because he wasn't as supreme here as he was in the myriad heavens and realms. He wasn't the only heavenly venerate here. Moreover, he probably didn't have an advantage in terms of experience or strength. However, these were not things that he needed to consider now. What he wanted to do now was to return to Fate Divine Capital and kill Emperor God Ru completely to prevent future troubles. As for Space-Time Heavenly Lord, would he make things difficult for him because of an emperor? It must be said that Yi Shiwen's way of thinking was completely different from before after he had advanced his realm. The Emperor realm was no longer on the same level as him. At this moment, he was no longer a peak sovereign lord, but a heavenly venerable. He took a step forward and instantly left this spacious star region. However, just as he was about to step into Fate Divine Dynasty, he suddenly realized that the nomological laws around him had suddenly changed. He was no longer in the original starry sky. Instead, he had stepped into a small plain with high mountains and flowing rivers. In the center of this small plain was a tall mountain, surrounded by clouds and mist, towering into the sky. A thatched cottage was erected on the mountainside of this mountain. A red-clothed youth was sitting on a stone bench in the small courtyard in front of the thatched cottage. He raised his head and looked at Yi Shiwen with a faint smile on his face. Yi Shiwen was slightly vigilant at first. However, when he saw the young man in red, he seemed to know something. The young man in red was dressed in a long red robe. His jet-black hair was scattered behind him, and a sword hung casually on his waist. He was drinking by himself. The young man in red raised his cup to Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen didn't act pretentiously. He took a step forward and sat opposite the young man in red. "May I know how to address you?" Yi Shiwen asked. He could feel a mysterious and unfathomable aura from the young man in red. If the young man in red was just an emperor lord, Yi Shiwen could see through him at a glance. Therefore, the identity of the young man in red was obvious. He was a heavenly venerable. Yi Shiwen wasn't naive enough to think that all heavenly venerables would have a good impression of him. However, he hadn't figured out the origin and purpose of the young man in red, so he didn't act rashly. Me? My name is Xian Yuan, the young man in red said with a smile. Don't you want a drink? This is something you can't drink outside. I brewed it myself. It has been here for at least 10 million years. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't drink it myself. Yi Shiwen picked up the cup of wine in front of him. Suddenly, a fragrant smell of sake hit his nose. The wine wasn't made from rare, natural treasures. It was just ordinary fruits. However, fruit wine made from ordinary fruits couldn't last for tens of millions of years. There must be other means. However, even if it was ordinary fruit wine that had been here for tens of millions of years and hadn't gone bad, its mellow quality was already supreme. May I know what advice you have for me? Yi Shiwen took a sip and revealed a look of enjoyment on his face. He could make good wine at will, but this level of immortal wine required time and foundation. I can't say that I'm giving advice. It's just that some people hope that I can stall you for a while. The young man in red, Xian Yuan, said faintly, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. However, what he had to do was to stall a heavenly venerable. No matter how one looked at it, it wasn't a trivial matter. That's a bit interesting. Do you know where I'm going? Yi Shiwen asked with a smile. Facing this unknown red-clothed young man, he wasn't worried at all. Although this red-clothed young man was terrifying and unfathomable, he hadn't displayed any strength that could threaten him. This was something that he was confident in. At the very least, he wasn't weak and cheap. Isn't it just returning to the fortune divine capital? But now, someone doesn't want others to disturb the situation there. Originally, you weren't on the list. Who would have thought that you would actually pass the heavenly tribulation at such a crucial time? How should I say this? You're indeed a powerful character. You're the second human I've ever known. Xian Yuan said with a smile. The second? Who's the other one? Yi Shiwen couldn't help but ask. He's a bastard, but he's also an expert. Very strong. Hee, that's a taboo name. Speaking of which, everything that's happening now was caused by him. Xian Yuan smiled. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. What kind of peerless expert was there in the human race? What kind of existence could actually cause the outer domain to attack the fortune divine capital? Could it be the Sway sovereign? Why are you going through so much trouble to stop me? Do you really want to destroy the fortune divine capital? Yi Shiwen said faintly. Xian Yuan didn't explain further, so he didn't pursue the matter. Destroy the fortune divine capital? Of course, that's impossible. It's just that some old fogies want to obtain something. Destroying the fortune divine capital? First, it's not necessary because they don't need to destroy the fortune divine capital to get what they want. Second, it's impossible. Many people have wanted to destroy the fortune divine capital, but no one has ever succeeded, unless they are the fortune heavenly monarch. Xian Yuan said faintly. Since you want to delay me, then I'll stay here for a while. Yi Shiwen said with a faint smile, but his eyes flickered brightly. He seemed to have come into contact with a huge secret. He had no intention of serving the fortune divine dynasty to the death. How long had it been since he came to the fortune divine dynasty? Not to mention the fortune divine dynasty, he didn't even have a sense of belonging to the fortune world. You're really a smart person. It's so comfortable talking to smart people. Xian Yuan laughed heartily. As long as you don't want to force your way out, isn't it a pleasant thing for us to sit here and talk about Tao and drink wine? As long as you don't make things difficult for me, everyone will have a good time. What do you want to know? As long as I can tell you, I'll tell you everything I know. Speaking of which, you're also a member of our circle, so there's no need to hide some things from you. Xian Yuan said straightforwardly. I want to know, why did the Outer Domain army besiege the fortune divine capital? Yi Shiwen asked immediately. This was the biggest question in his heart, so he naturally had to ask it in one go. About this matter, it's normal that you don't know about it. In fact, this also involves the fortune divine lord. After the fortune divine lord disappeared on the road of fortune, Many people wanted to follow in his footsteps and find the legendary fortune through the road of fortune. Xian Yuan said, "It's a pity that after the fortune divine lord disappeared, most people couldn't find the legendary fortune except for those who left with him. It's fine if we don't have the fortune, but because we're isolated from the land of fortune, our heavenly master realms are stuck. It's like we've met a ceiling, and no matter how hard we try, we can't go up." Originally, there was a key that could open the land of fortune and let the fortune chi of the land of fortune shine into the fortune divine dynasty. But later, that key was taken away by someone, and then it disappeared. Without the fortune chi of the land of fortune, not only can everyone not advance, but it's like they're trapped. And that person is a bastard from your human race. Hee. Now do you know why so many people don't like you? In fact, you've also been caught in the crossfire. Many people hate you mainly because of that guy. Chapter 33:59. Yishuan's face was also a little stunned. He naturally knew that many people had been hostile towards him ever since he had risen to prominence. He knew that many of them were because of the conflicts between them. However, some of them were inexplicable. Only now did he realize that the source of their hostility was actually in this place. Originally, with the good fortune key, people could occasionally use it to open up some places of fortune and replenish their power of fortune. However, after the good fortune key was seized, this opportunity disappeared. Many people chose to enter the path of fortune in search of the legendary fortune, but they disappeared without a trace. However, as far as I know, they didn't seem to be doing well. Some people stayed behind, and they formed the current structure of the fortune realm, including the four great holy masters of the north, south, east, and west. Xian Yuan continued to explain. Many years ago, the east, south, west, north, and south heavenly venerables, as well as space-time heavenly venerables, worked together to collect all kinds of supreme materials in order to reforge the fortune key. This should have been a good thing, but in reality, it wasn't so. Those guys wanted to swallow everything for themselves and only wanted the fortune chi to shine into the fortune divine capital. At that time, they would be baptized by the fortune chi, and their cultivation would improve by leaps and bounds. As for us, if our cultivation didn't improve, we would eventually have to submit to the fortune divine dynasty and be ordered around by them. So, you know what I'm talking about. This will definitely incur the wrath of the masses. Not only the people from the outer domains, but there are also many people from the fortune divine dynasty who are furious. What we're doing now is merely forcing them to express their stance. Xian Yuan took a sip of wine and said with a smirk. Yishuan finally understood why the current situation was so strange. The dignified capital of the fortune god dynasty was besieged, but no one was going to rescue them. Even those super sects that were under the control of the fortune god dynasty didn't make any move to rescue them. It turned out that the east, south, west heavenly masters had caused public anger. Originally, he didn't return to the fortune divine capital because he didn't have much of a sense of belonging to the fortune divine dynasty. Now, however, he had no choice but to stand on the side of Xian Yuan and the others. There was no other reason. He was also a celestial sovereign, and no one wanted to cultivate to the peak in the future to be faced with a ceiling that they could not break. It would be fine if there was no other way, but since there was another way, he naturally had to think of a way. Then again, the fortune divine dynasty's plan was really good. Once they succeeded, the fortune divine dynasty would sweep away all their previous decline and become the true ruler of the fortune divine dynasty. Although the fortune god dynasty was unhappy with the current situation, there were also many people who benefited from it. And now, Yishuan was one of the people who benefited from it. Unless, one day, he entered the fortune divine dynasty. In that case, he would have to consider a different matter. People always acted according to their own interests. Even heavenly venerates were the same. It all depended on what kind of interests could move the various heavenly venerates. Dare I ask, what exactly is this fortune chi? Can the heavenly venerables fight for it? Yishuan couldn't help but ask. You should know that law crystals can make it more convenient for us to cultivate, but do you know how to strengthen our foundation? How to cultivate? We will have to rely on this fortune chi. Xian Yuan explained, cultivators need to absorb the spirit energy between heaven and earth in order to cultivate. For celestial venerables, it is naturally possible to absorb the spirit energy between heaven and earth, but the efficiency is too low. Creation chi is the essence of creation. Even if you absorb just a little, it is better than absorbing spirit energy for thousands of years. With the creation chi, people are naturally unwilling to absorb more spirit energy. I see, no wonder, Yishuan said. No wonder the heavenly venerables fell out with the fortune god dynasty. If they really let the fortune god dynasty monopolize the fortune chi, no one would be able to survive. Of course, fortune chi is a good thing. Everyone wants it. The fortune god dynasty's famous mysterious fortune pill is refined with fortune chi as the main material. Xian Yuan said with a smile. So that's how it is. No wonder it can greatly improve one's cultivation, said Yi Shiwen. He had obtained a mysterious good fortune pill before. Naturally, he knew what kind of existence the mysterious good fortune pill was. It was incomparably precious to an emperor. For an emperor, a mysterious fortune pill refined with fortune chi is naturally incomparably precious. But for us heavenly venerables, the effect is a little worse. Still, it is quite a good cultivation treasure, Xian Yuan said with a smile. But if you think that it is really difficult to produce mysterious fortune pills, then you are gravely mistaken. In fact, the fortune god dynasty has a lot of them. The fortune god dynasty has accumulated a lot of good things for so many years, Xian Yuan said as he took a sip of wine. Speaking of which, although I have entered the heavenly venerable realm, there are still many things that I don't understand. Let me take this opportunity to ask for your advice, Yi Shiwen said with a cupped fist salute. Not asking for advice. Let's discuss the Tao, Xian Yuan said with a smile. It seemed that Yi Shiwen's original body was being held back here. At the same time, in the human race divine court, a seal quietly broke, and another Yi Shiwen walked out. Greetings, master. Bian Xiaoyu respectfully saluted and said. He felt a bit strange in his heart. He naturally knew about this seal. Before Yi Shiwen had left, he had repeatedly told him to undo this seal if the human race encountered something that they couldn't solve. His incarnation was inside, so ordinary problems were not a problem. But now, because of Yi Shiwen's power, who would dare to cause trouble for the human race? In addition, the human race had been busy annexing the heaven-devouring demon clan's territory all these years, so they basically did not expand. Therefore, they did not offend anyone. Under such circumstances, no one was willing to offend the human race. The moment she sensed that the seal had been broken, she was already here. But she felt a little strange. He did not break the seal, so why did the seal break by itself? Yishuan glanced at Bian Xiaoya, and a satisfied smile appeared in his eyes. He said, You don't need to have any doubts. The seal was indeed not broken by you, but by my original body. My original body is being held back, so it is inconvenient for me to act. But there are some things that I need to deal with, so I broke the seal. I see. Master, what do you need me to do? Bian Xiaoya asked immediately. I don't need you to do much. Just cultivate step by step. Yishuan said. Yes. Bian Xiaoya said. Yishuan looked at her and nodded slightly. Then, he took a step forward and headed in the direction of the fortune god dynasty. This was just an incarnation formed by a wisp of his spirit and spiritual power. Naturally, it could not be compared to his original body. But in terms of combat power, it had the cultivation of a peak emperor lord. But because it was not his original body and did not have a physical body, it could not be preserved for long. Originally, it was only used to delay the human race when they were in danger, so he did not think too much about it. But he did not expect that it would be put to use at this moment. Now that his original body was being held back by Xian Yuan, he could not personally kill Emperor God Rui. He could only let this incarnation do it. But this was also good. He could use the excuse of being held back by Xian Yuan to extricate himself from this matter. No one would be able to predict that he would kill Emperor God Rui. To him, although Emperor God Rui was strong, he wasn't a match for him. It was just like how the incarnations of Immortal Meow Meow and Emperor Hunyuan were much stronger than ordinary peak Emperor Kings. After attaining the Celestial Master Realm, the fighting power of his incarnation was much stronger than ordinary people could imagine. It was only slightly weaker than his original self before he passed his God's test. It was more than enough to deal with Emperor God Ru E. Moreover, if a Heavenly Master wanted to sneak in, it would be too big of a target. This was just right. Even if an incarnation was defeated, it would not be in any danger. Yishiwen could create many such incarnations. Although it was only an incarnation, it had already used many of the understanding and techniques of the Heavenly Master Realm. His speed was much faster than his original body before the Heavenly Tribulation. In just 3 days, he had already arrived at the periphery of the Fortune God's capital. At this time, the periphery of the Fortune God's capital had already become a super battlefield. It was not much different from the time when he had left. There were no strong experts coming. Those who came were the Fortune God dynasty's direct descendants elites, but it was useless. Even though they were elites, they were no different from ants in front of the foreign domain's heavenly venerables. In the absence of the Fortune God dynasty's heavenly venerables, all of their efforts were laughable and useless. Therefore, even the elites who came to support from the foreign domains did not dare to approach the battlefield. They could only stay close to the battlefield and faintly surround the foreign domain army. Under normal circumstances, the foreign domain army would definitely think of a way to wipe out the foreign domain army that had cut off their path of retreat. But now, they were indifferent, as if they knew that the foreign domain army did not pose a threat to them and did not care at all. There was a strange feeling in all of this. But now that Yishiwen knew the truth, he was not surprised. If it was just to force the heavenly masters of the Fortune God dynasty to compromise and make concessions, then everything was normal. Unless the foreign domain really wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Fortune God dynasty and fight to the death, otherwise they would not really start a war. This was something that all the heavenly masters knew in their hearts. The next step was to see who could not bear it first. Chapter 3360. On the Fortune Divine Dynasty's side, the several Emperor Lords were all top-notch experts. Just one of them alone could suppress a territory and ensure its safety. Originally, it was difficult for ordinary heavenly venerables to compete with them, but now all the heavenly venerables under the heavens wanted to go against them. Whether it was the heavenly venerables from the other domains or the Fortune Divine Dynasty's native heavenly venerables, none of them were willing to let the Fortune Divine Dynasty be the only force that could suppress them easily in the future. Although the strength of a heavenly venerables was only one aspect of a force's strength, it was also a very important aspect. If the Fortune Divine Dynasty's heavenly venerables cultivation base rose sharply, then their authority and influence would inevitably be greatly expanded. In other words, they would definitely have to give up more of their forces. Over time, they would have no choice but to submit to the Fortune Divine Dynasty. In the Fortune world, everything was cruel. Only strength mattered. The strong could naturally obtain more, and in order to become stronger, one had to snatch more. This was a virtuous cycle or a vicious cycle. No one wished to be left behind by others, so the competition was even more intense. It's broken, it's broken. Suddenly, a burst of cheers came from the camp of the foreign army. Then Yishiwen saw that the incomparably huge blood-red drumstick had directly broken through the defensive area of the divine capital of Fortune. Just like the area that Yishiwen had defended before, many elites in the divine capital of Fortune who didn't manage to retreat in time were annihilated in an instant and turned into clouds of blood rain. However, this blood-red drumstick absorbed the blood rain, making the blood-red drumstick even more powerful. It was truly a monstrous and ferocious force. In just a few days' time, the outer zone of the Fortune Divine Capital's defensive zone had already been broken through. The troops had already surrounded the Fortune Divine Capital's city walls. However, this didn't mean that the foreign domain's army could break through the Fortune Divine Capital's walls. On the contrary, an even more cruel siege had just begun. The foreign domain life forms soared into the sky, wanting to rush into the city, but there was no other way. There were many formations buried under the Fortune Divine Capital's walls that directly blocked the ability to fly. Although it didn't matter to real experts, it was like falling into a trap of death for ordinary Tao confirmation level life forms. They could only desperately think of ways to climb up. Even their claws couldn't really grasp the city walls because there were all kinds of talismans and formations on the city walls that were similarly incomparably sturdy. It was no different from a fantasy story for them to reach the city walls with just their claws. It was precisely because of this that it was extremely difficult to climb up the towering city walls of the Fortune Divine Capital. Many a time, one could only climb up by using the corpses of their companions as stepping stones. On the other hand, the elites of the Fortune Divine Capital could attack calmly. Powerful arrows rained down one after another, and each arrow was powerful enough to slice off a mountain. Although the elites of the Fortune Divine Capital had suffered heavy casualties, the foreign domain life forms had suffered even more. Their huge size was originally an advantage, but had become their weakness at this time. The elites of the Fortune Divine Capital didn't need to aim at all. They only needed to throw their arrows, and they could hit their targets. Once they were hit, their huge bodies would often explode into a huge bloody hole. Blood would spurt out, and bone fragments would fly in all directions. However, they didn't dare to not go forward. Behind them were the God Kings and Boundary Emperors supervising the battle formation. Behind those God Kings and Boundary Emperors were supervising the battle formation. At the most crucial moment, even the God Kings, Boundary Emperors, and Boundary Emperors had to personally go into battle. This was because it was super heavenly venerates like the Pantheon heavenly venerates who were tasked with this task. To the heavenly venerates who were top powerhouses, these people were merely a bunch of ants. They were simply a bunch of numbers. If they dared to not go forward, only death awaited them. Therefore, they would rather fight with their lives on the line. They would die in the hands of their own heavenly venerates and implicate their clansmen. Under such circumstances, the foreign domain life forms were unafraid of death. However, they didn't know that the ones who would decide the outcome of the battle weren't them, but the high and mighty heavenly venerates. If the heavenly venerates didn't take action, it was useless no matter how hard they fought. But it was useless because they were weak, and the weak couldn't control their own lives. The top powerhouses of the Fortune Divine Dynasty didn't take action, and the foreign domain heavenly venerates didn't take action either. Both sides seemed to have some sort of tacit understanding and didn't tear off all pretense of cordiality. In the past, Yishuin didn't understand, but now he understood. The foreign domain heavenly venerates were forcing space-time heavenly venerates and the other rulers of the Fortune Divine Dynasty to bow their heads. And these armies were merely cannon fodder in the game between the two sides. No one really cared about the lives of these ordinary people. Although it was cruel, it was a fact. It was a cruel fact. Yishuin glanced around and immediately blended in with the foreign domain life forms attacking the city and sneaked into the Fortune Divine Capital. With Yishuin's strength, it was too easy for him to not be discovered. Unless he was targeted by a heavenly venerate, he wouldn't be discovered. Generally speaking, heavenly venerates wouldn't be so bored as to pay attention to these small places. What they needed to do was to activate the blood-colored drumsticks and break through the city walls of the Fortune Divine Capital. Now that the outer perimeter had been cleared, they only needed to climb over the city walls to enter the interior of the Fortune Divine Capital. It was too easy. Moreover, as a general who had previously guarded the Fortune Divine Capital, Yishuin was very familiar with the many enchantments and array formations within the Fortune Divine Capital. It was very easy to sneak past them. Soon, Yishuin snuck into the Fortune Divine Capital and used an invisibility technique to walk freely on the streets of the Fortune Divine Capital. At this time, although there was a fierce battle going on outside the Fortune Divine Capital, the atmosphere inside was tense, but not chaotic. Although this was a city, it was too big. It was like a continent. Even if they were a little further away, they wouldn't be able to feel the intensity of the battle. Although they knew that the battle ahead was exciting, it was really difficult to feel anything. However, the battle soldiers that flew across the sky still reminded them of what was going on. The once-in-a-lifetime siege of the Fortune Divine capital was happening right in front of their eyes. Yishuin didn't tell anyone about his return to the Fortune Divine capital because what he was going to do next couldn't be seen by anyone. However, just as Yishuin was about to head to the true core of the Fortune Divine capital, the Fortune Heavenly Palace that had been built during the reign of the Fortune Heavenly Lord, an incomparably loud explosion suddenly came from the sky. Immediately after, the originally incomparably sturdy defensive array suddenly had an incomparably huge hole punched through it. Boundless energy waves directly swept out. Everyone was stunned. What the hell happened? How did they directly break into the interior of the Fortune Divine capital? This was something that had never happened before. One had to know that the defense of the Fortune Divine capital wasn't that simple. However, it was this attack that completely opened up a crack in the Fortune Divine capital. Creatures from the foreign domains also took advantage of this opportunity to rush in. One after another, extremely huge, ferocious beasts from the foreign domains rushed in, scaring everyone on the way. These ferocious beasts from the foreign domains didn't stay here for long. Instead, they headed straight for the Fortune Heavenly Palace in the center of the Fortune Divine capital. That was the core of the entire Fortune Divine capital and also the command center of the entire Fortune Divine capital. This also made those who were afraid of being slaughtered feel as if they had escaped into the heavens. They hurriedly fled into the distance and didn't dare to approach at all. Yishuin had opened his heavenly eye and naturally saw everything clearly. At the critical moment just now, it was precisely a saber light that had descended from the sky and swept over, directly cutting open the ultimate defense of the Fortune Divine capital. The foreign domains must have used some kind of method. However, compared to the blood-color drumstick, this kind of attack was only a one-time use method, just like the sword aura that Yishuin had stored in the altar. There's not much time left. Yishuin immediately realized that as these people broke in, whether it was the four great heavenly masters of the East, South, West, or space-time heavenly master, none of them would be able to continue their closed-door training in peace. Moreover, Pantheon Master and the others had obviously forced space-time heavenly master and the others out in one go, not giving them any chance to continue hiding. The crack that had broken in from the outside would not take long to heal. At that time, it would be very difficult for them to even leave, and they might even be trapped here. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't risk their lives, but now they had gone completely crazy for the sake of the Fortune Chi. If they failed, there naturally wouldn't be any results in the short term, but after a long time, they would have to submit to the Fortune Divine dynasty forever. Even if there was only this possibility, they absolutely couldn't accept such an outcome. Therefore, they had to fight because this was the most likely time to succeed. This time, even the other super sects and super powerful clans of the Fortune Divine dynasty were supporting them from behind. If they missed this opportunity, there would no longer be any possibility of resisting the Fortune Divine dynasty. Even if it was dangerous, they had to take the risk. They didn't have much time left, and, similarly, Yishuin didn't have much time left. Yishuin shot towards the Fortune Heavenly Palace. At this time, the Fortune Heavenly Palace was also in chaos, because no one had expected the foreign domains creatures to directly cross the Fortune Divine capital's walls and directly attack the Fortune Heavenly Palace. It was precisely because no one had expected this that the foreign domains creatures had the opportunity to attack the Fortune Divine capital in one fell swoop. At this time, Yishuin had also quietly hidden in the Fortune Heavenly Palace. Chapter 3361. The Fortune Heavenly Palace was built during the reign of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. It was the place where the Fortune Heavenly Monarch ruled the world. It was also the core of the entire Fortune God dynasty, and even the core of the entire Fortune world. The entire Fortune Heavenly Palace was intricate and complex, with layers upon layers of formations and boundaries. Although the Fortune Heavenly Palace might not encounter a surprise attack for countless years, once it did, it would definitely be a big deal. Therefore, the security here was the strictest. Yi Shiwen would have to spend a lot of effort to completely sneak in if he wanted to. Nobody was a match for his incarnation except for a few great heavenly masters. However, there were still many arrays and barriers. So, it was inevitable that his figure would be exposed. But now was different. The foreign armies were attacking, and chaos was everywhere. This provided him with a perfect opportunity. A good opportunity to sneak in. Chaos and chaos were everywhere, and no one noticed that there was one more person. At this time, the Fortune Divine Dynasty's true strength was on full display. Although it looked like the Fortune Heavenly Palace, the last nest of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, had been attacked, in reality, there was still a steady stream of elites flying out from various dimensional planes. These were the true trump cards of the Fortune Divine Capital, the elite troops hidden within the Fortune Heavenly Palace. There were actually over 1 million of them, and the ratio of God King Realm and Quasi-Emperor Realm experts among them was so high that it sent chills down one's spine. Without such a strong foundation, the Fortune Divine Dynasty wouldn't be able to suppress all the forces. This should be one of the most elite troops of the Fortune God Dynasty. If you don't count me in, just this army is enough to wipe out the human race. Yi Shiwen sighed. The foundation of the Fortune God Dynasty was indeed far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. It was no wonder that the Fortune God Dynasty could remain as stable as Mount Tai even when there were super sects and the top 10 powerful clans occupying a region. If the influence of heavenly venerables was not included, just this army alone was enough to wipe out a super tyrant of the top 10 powerful clans. Who knew how many years it took to accumulate such a force? The human race did not have such a foundation. Compared to these super behemoths, the human race was still too far away. But he did not lament for long. He immediately entered the depths of the Fortune Heavenly Palace, avoiding the defensive boundaries and formations. As he ventured deeper into the Fortune Heavenly Palace, he saw many dimensional planes with hidden treasures that had been breached by alien life forms. Those powerful alien life forms were wantonly plundering them. These subplanes were the treasury of the Fortune God Capital, and no one knew how deep they were. There were layers upon layers of space, forming a world of their own. Who knew how many rare treasures, elixirs, and so on were hidden inside? These things formed the true foundation of the Fortune God Dynasty. Fortune God Dynasty had not been attacked for countless years. Of the God Capital, God Dynasty's Fortune God Capital, so God Dynasty's treasury was always full, and now God Dynasty's domain. There were gourds that contained medicinal pills, as well as many powerful magic treasures. There were books that recorded supreme martial arts, scriptures that were engraved with the principles of the Great Tao, and all sorts of rare materials. There were also all sorts of divine weapons. Many foreign creatures who obtained these treasures had their cultivation soar, especially those who had swallowed elixirs. Some of them had died from overeating, while others had their cultivation soar, becoming great experts in an instant. Their cultivation soared, and suddenly, the elites of the Fortune God Capital were forced to retreat. Yi Shiwen could even see some pseudo-Dao tools mixed in among them. These pseudo-Dao tools were refined to imitate the genuine Dao tools. The only difference was that the Emperor had branded his own great way on them. In terms of power, these pseudo-Dao tools were also great. It could be said that they were extremely rare because the difficulty of refining pseudo-Dao tools was slightly lower than that of Dao tools. The raw materials were the same as the Emperor's Dao tools. There are so many treasures. This is indeed the foundation of the Fortune God Dynasty. But it will be a pity if these things were to be taken by you beasts, especially these elixirs. If my human race obtains them, the strength of the entire race will go up a level, and we will be able to catch up with the top 10 clans in the shortest time. Yi Shiwen could clearly see that many of these elixirs were elixirs that could increase cultivation. It would be a pity if they were taken by those foreign creatures. He immediately decided to act secretly. As the saying goes, a horse will not get fat without grass at night, and a man will not get rich without wealth. He himself had little use for these things, but the human race could use them. He immediately formed a big hand and swept away all these magic treasures, elixirs, heavenly treasures, and divine weapons. Those foreign creatures had just broken into the treasury and wanted to plunder wantonly. But before they could plunder much, they were intercepted by someone else. They immediately became furious and roared. Then, they twisted their huge bodies and attacked Yishiwen. However, how could these people pose any threat to Yishiwen? They just blew a mouthful of air, and it transformed into tribulation winds that Yishiwen had encountered when he had crossed the tribulation. And these foreign creatures were blown into ashes in an instant. Hundreds and thousands of them turned into nothingness. These things piled up like a sea and were all absorbed into the inner world that Yishiwen had formed. At this time, even if his inner world was just an incarnation, it was boundless, just like a sea of stars. Although there were many elixirs and magic treasures, it was not enough to fill it. These foreign creatures were killed in an instant. Then, Yishiwen followed the foreign creatures. Every time, they broke into a treasury and slaughtered the elites of the fortune god dynasty guarding the treasury. Yishiwen would take action and sweep away all the treasures in the treasury. All the valuable magic treasures, elixirs, Taoist scriptures, martial arts manuals, everything was taken away. In this chaotic situation, no one noticed the abnormality here. Heaven's secrets were in chaos, and everyone thought that these things were taken away by foreign creatures. The deeper in the treasury, the more precious the things in the treasury were. Outside, there were only ordinary divine tools. Inside, there were top-grade divine tools. The frequency of pseudo-Dao tools was also increasing, and there were even a lot of Dao tools. These were left behind by the local masters of the fortune god dynasty or foreign creatures. They had become the foundation of the fortune god dynasty, and now, these things had become Yishiwen's. Just like that, they swept through layer by layer. The foreign army also went all out, so the speed of their sweep was very fast. They broke through a lot of treasure vaults of the fortune divine capital, but most of them fell into Yishiwen's hands in the end. As for the foreign emperor monarchs, they were busy contending with the fortune divine capital's top experts, and could not be bothered with these matters. The emperor masters of the fortune heavenly palace were also fighting desperately, so no one paid attention to this side. Yishiwen was naturally overjoyed in his heart. Sure enough, the wealth he plundered was vast. In just a short period of time, the wealth he had plundered was enough to increase the foundation of the human race by several times. Even so, compared to the boundless treasury of the fortune god dynasty, it was still a drop in the ocean. Unless he could break through the entire fortune heavenly palace, it was impossible to take all the accumulated wealth for himself. But with his current strength, if he really did that, the consequences would be severe. It was not a big deal to follow behind the foreign army and get some wealth, but if he took all the wealth away, then the four great heavenly masters would probably go berserk. But even so, Yishiwen was already very satisfied. When these wealth were integrated into the human race, it would not be a problem for the human race's strength to increase by several times. He estimated that there would be 1 or 2 more emperor masters. At this time, within the heavenly palace of fortune, more and more tyrannical auras were boiling and awakening. This meant that many of the peerless powerhouses sleeping within the heavenly palace of fortune were awakening and joining the ranks of the foreign creatures. Yishiwen even saw the silhouette of Pan Tian flickering. It seemed as if he was resisting the enchantments and arrays of the good fortune heavenly palace. These interceptions and arrays had been specially processed. Yishiwen only needed to be careful and avoid them. However, the foreign army had to use all their strength to attack them one by one, breaking through them one by one in order to pass through. If Pan Tian hadn't been at the front to attack cities and break through the arrays and boundaries for them, the foreign army would not have been able to pass so smoothly. The fortune god dynasty's foundation was recovering. If Pan Tian hadn't been at the front to break through the enemy lines, this foreign army that had suddenly attacked the Fortune Heavenly Palace would have been annihilated in no time. But even so, the recovered foundation of the Fortune God dynasty made it so that even the foreign army, led by a top existence like Tian, couldn't move an inch forward. Yi Shiwen took advantage of the time when the elites of the Fortune God dynasty and the foreign army were being held up and quietly sneaked into the depths of the Fortune Heavenly Palace. When he saw all kinds of good things, he also took some of them, but he didn't dare to take all of them like he did outside. Because the foreign army was acting as a shield outside, no one knew where the wealth ended up. But if he acted recklessly here, he would be found out very quickly. And Yi Shiwen's main goal was to find Emperor God Rui and kill him. Previously, there had been 2 attempts to kill Yi Shiwen at the hands of the foreign army, and Yi Shiwen remembered all of it. He wasn't a guy who liked to let things go. Vengeance was his character. Even after becoming a heavenly venerable, it hadn't changed. To these top powerhouses, a heart of innocence was incomparably important. His figure flashed between the many palaces, shuttling back and forth, searching. Soon, he seemed to have found something and quickly flew in a direction. Chapter 3362. As Yi Shiwen shuttled through the palace, he constantly calculated the whereabouts of Emperor God Rui. Although the sky was chaotic, he quickly found Emperor God Rui. At this time, Emperor God Rui was not in the center commanding the army to resist the attack of the foreign army. Instead, he arrived at the entrance of a treasure house. He opened the treasure house, and suddenly, the fragrance of elixirs filled the air. Yi Shiwen recognized it in an instant. Wasn't this the mysterious creation pill that he had swallowed in the past? At this time, in this treasure vault, mysterious creation pills were piled up like a mountain, overflowing with elixir energy. If an ordinary deity took a breath, their cultivation would increase by tens of thousands of years. It was an extremely precious treasure. After taking a few breaths of the elixir energy, Emperor God Rui felt that his cultivation was growing faintly. However, he still did not take the mysterious creation pills. This was a reward that only those who had made great contributions to the Fortune God dynasty could receive. Only those few heavenly masters were qualified to control him. They were the true owners of these mysterious creation pills. Therefore, he did not have the qualifications to own them. He could only receive mysterious creation pills after making great contributions. Of course, it was much easier for him to obtain them than Yi Shiwen. His cultivation far surpassed many of his peers, and he was even comparable to an old senior like the Battle Emperor. It was because of this convenience that he had been able to assist the space-time Heavenly Venerate in controlling the Fortune Divine Dynasty for a long time. Although Space-Time Heavenly Master was the ruler of the Fortune God Dynasty, he could not control everything in the Fortune God Dynasty at all times, just like Yi Shiwen's status in the human race. Yi Shiwen was also at the top of the hierarchy. Nominally, he was in charge of everything, but in reality, he only took care of the most important things, which were related to the fate of the race. For ordinary things, the human sovereign, the Fengyi clan, and even the lower-level quasi-emperors would take care of them in an orderly manner. And Emperor God Rui took advantage of this opportunity to obtain great benefits for him. Therefore, his cultivation was on par with the Battle Emperor, and he could truly control the Fortune God dynasty. However, even so, he could not casually take away strategic resources like the mysterious creation pills. Even if the mysterious creation pills were piled up like a mountain, he could not casually touch them. Even if he had enough authority to obtain them, he needed to at least have enough authority. After all, he wasn't the true master of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Even the space-time Heavenly Venerate couldn't casually absorb a large amount of the Fortune Divine Dynasty's treasures, because there were still the East, South, West, and West Heavenly Venerates restricting each other. Therefore, even if it was right in front of them, they couldn't casually snatch it away like Yi Shiwen. He wasn't anxious about the foreign armies that were constantly launching surprise attacks from outside, because he had already sent people to inform the other lords. At the same time, he, who had been accompanying Space-Time Empyrean, knew very well why these foreign armies had come and what they wanted to achieve. Naturally, it was impossible for them to destroy the divine capital of creation, because if they had such foolish thoughts, they would be the first to be buried in the fortune divine capital. What a pity! Emperor God Rui let out a sigh. None of this belonged to him. After reaching this stage, it was actually very difficult for his cultivation to progress any further. He already represented the limits of the Emperor-King realm. Not everyone was like the lightning monarch who had survived a calamity, and not everyone was a monster like Yishiwen. He was already at his limit. Unless he attracted heaven's retribution, it would be impossible for his cultivation to progress any further. He could only improve himself bit by bit. Yes, it's a pity that none of this belongs to you. It's a pity that you will also die here today. At this time, a cold voice suddenly sounded, giving Emperor God Rui a fright. Given his cultivation was already at the peak of the Emperor-King realm, it was impossible for others to approach him so silently. This was the reason why he was shocked. However, he quickly regained his senses and knew the identity of the person who had come, because he couldn't be more familiar with this voice. Martial Emperor. That's right, it's me. Yishiwen's figure slowly appeared in front of him. You're actually not dead yet. Emperor God Rui looked at Yishiwen with some surprise. Because the heaven's secret was completely chaotic here, he couldn't calculate whether Yishiwen was dead or alive. However, in his opinion, Yishiwen was definitely dead after being attacked by the blood-red drumstick and provoking Pantheon Venerable. He was still secretly delighted that he had so cleverly eliminated such a powerful opponent. However, Yishiwen had returned in a domineering manner, giving him a hard slap in the face. All of his previous thoughts now seemed to be nothing but his own wishful thinking. Yes, I'm not dead yet. Are you disappointed? You arranged so many methods to deal with me, but I'm still alive. Yishiwen had a faint smile on his face. It's a pity that you had so many methods. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be dead. Martial Emperor, the foreign creatures are invading now. Instead of resisting, what are you trying to do here? Are you coveting the mysterious creation pill here? That's a crime of disobedience. Emperor God Rui hurriedly threatened. A crime of disobedience? Yishiwen sneered. Do you still think I care now? Obviously, Emperor God Rui was isolated from the outside world. Even the heaven's secret could not detect him. Otherwise, it was impossible that such a big news like him attaining Tao would not have no news at all. This was the divine capital of fortune. If the news was so outdated, then it would not be far from destruction. I've already left, and now I've returned personally. Why do you think I'm doing this? Yishiwen said coldly. Isn't it to kill you? How dare you? Emperor God Rui's eyebrows immediately stood up. He could not restrain his anger, and his eyes were burning with great anger. Someone actually treated him as prey. After he had left, he still dared to return to find a chance to kill him. You're really courting death, Martial Emperor. Just because of what you said, not only will you die, but the human race will also die. Who do you think you are? Even if you're stronger than me, this is my home ground. Do you think you can survive? He did not take Yishiwen seriously at all. This was his home ground, and he had the absolute advantage. Not only his own strength, but he could also mobilize the power of the enchantments and formations in the heavenly palace of fortune to kill Yishiwen in one fell swoop. Not to mention, there were many elites here who could be mobilized at any time to kill Yishiwen. With the foundation of the heavenly palace of fortune, even a heavenly master could be killed if he rashly attacked, let alone Yishiwen, who was only a peak emperor lord. In his opinion, Yishiwen was really courting death. If he had wanted to find an excuse to kill Yishiwen previously, then there was no need for that now. A ready-made reason had already been delivered to his door. Yishiwen attacking the treasure vault was enough to kill him. When the time came, he could find a crime for him. Even the stubborn old battle emperor would not be able to find any reason to question him. Who would really run around for a dead man? Moreover, he had the support of a super expert like Space-Time Heavenly Master. No one could do anything to him. However, he soon realized that something was wrong, because his order to mobilize the elites was like a stone thrown into the sea. There was no response from anyone at all. He wanted to mobilize the enchantments and formations, but there was no response at all. This abnormal situation immediately sent a chill down his spine, and he became vigilant. At this moment, Yi Shiwen smiled and said, "Did you realize that you can't call for help? Or have you isolated yourself from the outside world? Did you do something?" Emperor God Rui calmed down after confirming that it was Yi Shiwen's doing. People were most afraid of the unknown. Once they knew, everything was not so scary anymore. "That's right, it's me. Why do you think I told you so much just now?" "It's to isolate you from the outside world, although you're still standing here. But in fact, you are already in a different plane," Yi Shiwen said indifferently. The fundamental reason why he had said so much to Emperor God Rui was to set up an enchantment to isolate Emperor God Rui from the outside world. It was to buy time. "Impossible. I am a peak Emperor Lord. How can I not notice any changes in the plane?" Emperor God Rui denied immediately because he did not believe that someone could change his location without him knowing. Even if he used this method to deal with a first-stage Emperor Lord who had just entered the Emperor Lord realm, it was unlikely that he would succeed. No matter how big the gap between the two sides was, such a big movement could not be done silently. "Why is it impossible? I have already entered the Heavenly Master realm," Yi Shiwen said with a cold smile. "Now that the divine capital of fortune is in a mess, and all information has been isolated by the foreign army, you may not know that I've already passed the heavenly tribulation and reached the Heavenly Master realm. Of course you will not understand, because this is the method of a Heavenly Master." Martial Emperor, don't you dare use words to disturb my mind. If you had entered the Heavenly Master realm, you wouldn't even need to use this method. You can kill me directly. Emperor God Rui sneered. In his opinion, he had already found the truth, and this was just Yi Shiwen's boasting. He was shocked by him just now, and almost had the urge to turn around and escape. However, when he came back to his senses, he still felt that he had been deceived. He knew very well how big the gap between an Emperor Lord and a Heavenly Master was. Even if he was a peak Emperor Lord, he would not be able to withstand a single blow. One more blow and he would die. The process was so fast that he did not even have time to react. Chapter 3363. After killing Emperor God Rui, Yi Shiwen kept Emperor God Rui in his inner world, then looked at the treasure vault. Although the treasure vault was set up ingeniously, it was not difficult for him to open it, having seen the handprint of Emperor God Rui opening it. Rumble. As the treasure vault slowly opened, endless elixir chi rushed out again. Yi Shiwen opened his mouth and sucked it all into his body. Suddenly, he felt his body solidify a lot, and he immediately formed a new physical body. This was a real physical body, not a body that was a mixture of yuan qi and laws. An additional incarnation with a physical body was undoubtedly very useful for the human race. It could be said that there was another peak Emperor Lord to oversee the human race, because with a real physical body, there was no need to worry that it could dissipate at any time. This was completely different from a Yuan Shen incarnation. Originally, Yi Shiwen didn't have the idea of forming an incarnation's body. After all, the cost of forming such a body was too great. Moreover, there weren't many benefits for him. After all, his incarnation was powerful. However, it wouldn't take much effort for him to kill an incarnation with the strength of his main body. However, now that he had absorbed the sky full of elixir chi, the situation was different. The elixir chi was thick and did not dissipate. It had accumulated for tens of thousands of years, and he absorbed it all in one breath. It was equivalent to swallowing dozens of mysterious creation pills in one breath. Only then could his physical body become a sage and create another physical body out of thin air. However, if that was the case, this physical body could only reach this level and could not advance any further in this lifetime. It was created out of thin air, and with such strength, it was possible to rely on his main body's understanding of the Heavenly Master Law. It could be said that he was born with the cultivation of a peak Emperor Lord, but was limited by this and could not advance any further in this lifetime. He would need a lot of mysterious creation pills if he wanted to completely clear the acupoints and become his second avatar. However, if he really succeeded, the result would be extremely gratifying. Then, his avatar would also have the ability to cultivate, and it would be much easier for him to enter the celestial master realm in the future. With his main body protecting him, there was no need to worry about external interference. As long as he survived the heaven's retribution, the human race would have two heavenly masters protecting him. The power of the human race would instantly increase by a lot. A race could be a person's wings, but conversely, a person's strength could also be a race's wings. For Yi Shiwen, this hidden trump card could not only protect the human race when he wasn't around. Most importantly, it could also leave a way out for himself. In case of an accident, he wouldn't die with this external incarnation. At a critical moment, it might even be of great help to him. He had known this before, but he had never tried it before because the resources consumed were too exaggerated. It was not difficult for him to casually create a God realm outer body incarnation, but what was the use of that? But now that he had these mysterious creation pills, it would be much simpler. This was a huge fortune. However, even if there was a huge fortune in front of him, he couldn't take it all. Otherwise, the furious heavenly masters would definitely join forces to calculate it. At that time, he might not be able to keep this secret with his skills. If he only took a little less, the heavenly masters wouldn't notice. Yi Shiwen had plundered tens of thousands of Xian creation pills from the treasury. It was like a mountain of wealth had been plundered by him. Even so, he had only taken less than 1/10 of the total wealth. He didn't take more. Otherwise, the heavenly masters would definitely be alarmed. This could only be done during the chaos. Under normal circumstances, he definitely wouldn't have had this opportunity. Now, he didn't think of fighting against the heavenly masters. First, it wasn't necessary. Second, no matter how strong he was, he couldn't withstand the siege of those people. He couldn't help but sigh. Back then, he had made a great contribution and risked his life to obtain a mysterious creation pill. That mysterious creation pill helped him rush all the way to the peak of the ninth realm. Now, he casually took away tens of thousands of them. The world had changed. At the same time, he was deeply shocked by the foundation of the Fortune God dynasty. With his current strength, it was indeed unwise to make an enemy of the Fortune God dynasty. But it didn't matter. If he hadn't been forced into a dead end, he wouldn't have chosen to go against the Fortune God dynasty. There was no need for that. He could use the Fortune God dynasty as his wings to protect him as he continued to grow. With tens of thousands of mysterious creation pills, he could say that as long as he came out of seclusion, his cultivation would improve. Who knew how many years of time he would save? After closing the door of the treasure house, Yi Shiwen didn't stay for long. Since he had killed Emperor God Rui, he had achieved his goal. Moreover, he had obtained tens of thousands of mysterious creation pills. In addition to the wealth he had previously plundered, it was a huge harvest. He didn't stay any longer. He directly flew out of the Fortune Heavenly Palace. He could already sense that there was a powerful existence flying out from the depths of the Fortune Heavenly Palace. He didn't have much time left. He was only an incarnation, not the real body. He didn't have the ability to reverse the sky. Just as he left the Fortune Heavenly Palace, he saw a giant holding a blood-red drumstick in the void. Every time it smashed down, the entire Fortune Heavenly Palace shook violently. It was as if the sky was falling down. Tragic battles were everywhere. The alien life forms had already attacked the Fortune Heavenly Palace. At this moment, they were fighting with all their might. If they didn't fight, they would die. The elites of the Fortune God dynasty inside were the elites among the elites. Even though they were caught off guard, they weren't ordinary people. This was the final foundation of the Fortune God dynasty. Looking around, there were god kings and quasi-emperors everywhere. Many of these people had served in the Fortune God dynasty's army in their early years. Later, they left the Fortune God dynasty's army to cultivate in seclusion here. Counting their ages, there were many who had cultivated for more than 10 million years. Even though they hadn't reached the Emperor realm, they were far stronger than the alien life forms. After all, even if these alien life forms cultivated to the Emperor realm, they only had a lifespan of 10 million years. How could they be compared to these old monsters? These people were monsters who had crawled out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. After many years of war, their combat strength was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. If Venerable Tian hadn't taken the lead to kill these top old monsters, it wouldn't have taken long for the alien life forms to be wiped out. It was a bit exaggerated to say that any random person here would be a sect master, but it was true that any random person here would be an elder of a great sect. After so many years of war, they had arranged for this great war. They had relied on the geographical advantage of the Heavenly Fortune Palace to challenge the Emperor monarchs. For a time, the entire scene was in a deadlock. Even Venerable Tian couldn't act presumptuously. Many emperors had already been awakened from their closed-door cultivation and spontaneously formed a large formation to resist Venerable Tian. Even Venerable Tian couldn't break through the Fortune Heavenly Palace's defense system alone. He couldn't advance or retreat. Suddenly, at this moment, a terrifying saber light burst out from the depths of the void, instantly splitting into thousands of rays, directly sealing off the entire space. Regardless of whether they were quasi-emperors, divine kings, or divine kings, wherever the saber light passed, they were all annihilated into nothingness. Tens of thousands of foreign creatures were killed with a single saber strike. However, they were merely affected by the shockwaves. The true target of the saber light was none other than the Tian sovereign. Countless saber lights sealed off his path of retreat, and another saber strike aimed at his forehead, intending to split him in half. Coiling Sky Sovereign, how dare you? Do you really think that there's no one in our Fortune God dynasty that can stop you? A loud bellow accompanied by a blade light swept out. Instantly, a gigantic palace appeared around Tianzuan, protecting him within it. This was an extremely powerful protection. The Tian Palace was an immortal treasure that he had used to attain the Tao. Naturally, he would bring it along with him. Boom! The saber light sank into the Tian Palace, almost blasting away the restrictions within the Tian Palace and blasting Tianzuan in half on the spot. However, although this saber light was extremely powerful, it was still unable to break through the defense of the Tian Palace and slash Tianzuan in half. Senior South, if you want to kill me, come out yourself. I'm afraid that this saber chi alone won't be able to do anything to me. Tianzuan stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He stood alone between heaven and earth, the focus of the world attention. How dare you? At this moment, a figure slowly emerged from the depths of the Fortune Heavenly Palace. It was a man dressed in a navy blue robe. This man had a head full of fiery red hair, like a blazing flame. His entire person looked sharp, as if he was looking down on the world. Everyone's eyes were focused on him. This was the supreme ruler who had ruled over the vast southern region for countless years, one of the most lofty people in the Fortune God dynasty, Senior South. What a terrifying power! Everyone felt the crushing pressure of this power. Almost everyone below the Emperor realm felt the urge to kneel down. The Emperor realm emperors were also trembling, feeling extremely uncomfortable. Fortunately, he quickly retracted his aura. Only then did everyone feel a sense of relief. If you don't have guts, how could you have reached your current realm? Tianzuan sneered. Are the others still not willing to come out? Do you think you can leave if you come out? Senior South said coldly. Do you think you're still at your peak? If they really come out, you'll die today. Do you dare to kill me? A cold smile appeared on Tianzuan's face. Chapter 3364. If Yishuan had really stepped into the Heavenly Master realm, why would he need to go through so much trouble to kill him? What would he do? Therefore, in his opinion, this was simply nonsense. Summer insects cannot speak of ice. Yishuan sneered. Emperor God Rui was originally not his match. Now, he was not even qualified to be his opponent. Emperor God Rui snorted coldly. In an instant, his body flickered and he appeared in front of Yishiwen. Boundless laws flew out from his body and condensed into a terrifying giant hand that slammed down on Yishiwen. Yishiwen casually pointed his finger and turned the terrifying giant hand into ashes. Not even a single hair on Yishiwen's body was hurt. What? Emperor God Rui was about to launch another attack, but was shocked to see that his attack had been casually dispelled by Yishiwen. This was the prelude to the attack, and it would affect the subsequent attack. How could he not be shocked? He tapped the void with the tip of his foot, and his figure suddenly flew behind him. Just as he was about to fly back, he saw a knife hand slash through the void. Even in a place like the Fortune Heavenly Palace, a black void crack appeared. Moreover, this was just a simple hand chop, which showed how terrifying the attack power was. Thump, thump, thump. Emperor Godrue, who had landed on the ground, took a few steps before finally coming to a stop. At that moment, he could still feel a chill running down his spine. If he had been a little slower, he would have been sliced into two by the handblade. Yishiwen was indeed as terrifying and unfathomable as ever. If not, he would not have chosen to endure and wait for the foreign creatures to kill him. He would have done it himself. However, he was only surprised for a moment. After all, he had gone through hundreds of battles and gone through many trials and tribulations to attain his current cultivation and status. In an instant, he reacted. Clang! At this moment, a jasper sword streaked across the sky. It seemed as if it was about to split the horizon and slash towards Yishiwen. The might of a peak sovereign lord's attack was astonishing. If it wasn't for Yishiwen's barrier and matrix locking it in this dimensional plane, such a big movement would have alarmed everyone. And in front of him, all kinds of strange phenomena appeared on Yishiwen's body. All kinds of martial arts, all kinds of magical weapons. All of them appeared in a flash, all in his martial arts world. It was only Yishiwen's doppelganger that was present now. Of course, it was impossible for him to have those Dao tools with him. However, with his current realm, there was no difference. He could condense the Law Talisman into a martial instrument with great power. Even though he didn't have many Dao tools with him, he could still use them because he had already turned this into a supreme secret technique. Boom! With a deafening rumble, the Jade Sword collided with the supreme secret technique. La 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 la! A terrifying frenzy was set off in all directions. Yishiwen's supreme secret technique was contending against the Taoist tool, but he was not at a disadvantage. Trying to go against me with a secret technique. Emperor God Rui roared and flew up into the sky. Then, he transformed into a huge dragon and swooped down towards Yishiwen. Yishiwen did not have any Dao weapons, nor did he have a physical body. But with these secret techniques, he faced Emperor God Rui and fought against this strong enemy. After all, he was not in his original body. Because of this, he could not use some celestial master techniques. But even so, it was enough to go against Emperor God Rui. Pung, pung, pung. The battle between the two was extremely fast. In an instant, they had exchanged hundreds and thousands of blows. Yishiwen was slowly gaining the upper hand. Although he did not have any Dao weapons and was at a disadvantage most of the time, and without a physical body, his cultivation realm was far higher than Emperor God Rui's. This was the fundamental reason why he was able to gain the upper hand. When this power was pushed to its peak, the shock waves from the fight between the two of them became much smaller. It was as if two people without any true chi were fighting, and they would collapse at the first contact. The changes between moves were extremely quick. The longsword in Emperor God Rui's hand slashed out tens of thousands of sword techniques. The reason why Yishiwen was able to contend with Emperor God Rui with just a mystical secret skill was that he was able to suppress Emperor God Rui very quickly. 6 Paths of Reincarnation. Yishiwen continued to use the 6 Paths of Reincarnation fist. After a long period of mutual suppression, both sides could no longer maintain a balance. Yishiwen's 6 Paths of Reincarnation fist shone with a terrifying divine light. All kinds of secret techniques and martial arts fell from his body like rain. But the rain was very special. All of them were fragments of loss. They scattered like rain, and when they hit the boundaries and arrays, there would be deafening banging sounds. Puff! Emperor God Rui retreated continuously. He was injured by the fist force and was sent flying. He wanted to counterattack, but the huge force penetrated his entire body, making it impossible for him to turn around. At this moment, all kinds of thunder and lightning roared around Yishiwen. The electric light was even more dazzling. The great Tao filled the sky, bursting with terrifying combat power that surpassed peak Emperor God Rui. Yishiwen looked down on Emperor God Rui strategically and did not take him seriously. But in reality, he did not hold back at all. He fought with all his might. Pung! Yishiwen stomped his feet. His entire body was like a meteor as he chased after Emperor God Rui. Then, he punched through the sky, tearing the universe apart. Starlight bloomed and then extinguished. It was like a blooming flower of the great Tao, from birth to death. This was in line with the meteorite pattern of the great Tao. The thunder and lightning around Yishiwen wrapped around his fist as he punched towards Emperor God Rui. In a moment of desperation, Emperor God Rui spat out a mouthful of blood. Suddenly, he felt the sky full of light scattering. The blood essence had all turned into a piece of jade aura. This jade aura carried unimaginable power as it blasted towards Yishiwen. Pong! The thunder and the jade aura collided violently. This was the ultimate clash between peak Emperor gods. There were no tricks or plots, only a hot-blooded clash. At the same time, it was also a demonstration of one's own great Tao path. Blood spurted out instantly. Yishiwen's fist had smashed the jade chi and landed on Emperor God Rui's body. Bone fragments flew and blood splattered. In an instant, it was as though a flower had bloomed and Emperor God Rui's body almost exploded. His tyrannical physical body, his nomological laws, and his great Tao could not protect him from the attack. He spat out another mouthful of blood on the spot. The entire scene looked extremely tragic. Blood sprayed everywhere. At the same time, various nomological prisoners were imprinted in the void. In particular, the sky full of Emperor God Rui's jade aura had been shattered by Yishiwen's punch. In a direct confrontation of the great Tao, he was simply too weak. There was a huge gap between him and Yishiwen. How could this be? Emperor God Rui slammed hard onto the ground, creating a huge crater in the palace's ground. His entire body felt like it had fallen apart. He could not use any of his strength at all. He felt very strange. He had never expected Yishiwen to be so much stronger than him. They were both peak Emperor gods, but he could not imagine the gap between them to be this big, especially now that Yishiwen had made it clear that he had not used any trump cards. He had not even used any Tao tools. Impossible. I am the peak of the Emperor God realm. How could anyone surpass me? Emperor God Rui's face was full of disbelief. In the Emperor God realm, he was almost invincible. He had truly reached the peak. Although it was a little arrogant for him to consider himself the peak of this realm, he was indeed qualified to do so. He could even say that before space-time Heavenly Lord had attracted the Heavenly Lord Tribulation, the difference between them was probably similar. Even if space-time Heavenly Lord was slightly more powerful at that time, it was impossible for him to achieve such a result. You are the peak. You still have a long way to go. Yishiwen, who had experienced this stage, naturally had a look of disdain on his face. If one were to say that he was the peak, it would only be possible if he had reached the same realm. Emperor God Rui seemed to be similar to the Battle Emperor. However, in fact, he was still not at the peak. Even if he were to really fight, he might not be a match for the Battle Emperor. Sometimes, skills only represented one aspect. The Battle Emperor had too much experience. Even heavenly lords of the same realm might not be a match for him. Not everyone was as freakish as Yishiwen, who had managed to escape death like the Electric Lord. Yishiwen sneered and stomped his foot down. It was as though all the power in the world had condensed into this foot, and it landed directly on Emperor God Rui's body. Pong! Emperor God Rui let out a blood-curdling screech. His body suddenly trembled violently and then split into pieces. The entire heavenly palace of fortune shook violently. If it wasn't for the barrier and the formation, the entire heavenly palace of fortune would have been affected and everyone would have been alarmed. Yi Shiwen stepped through God Emperor Rue Yi's body, causing it to disintegrate and forcing his primordial spirit out of his body. Damn it, Martial Emperor, I won't let you off. Emperor God Rui roared and struggled to release light from the depths of his spirit. He wanted to tear the space apart and escape. He couldn't care less about his body. He could tell that Yi Shiwen was definitely strong enough to kill him. He didn't dare to stay any longer. Yi Shiwen sneered. He stretched out his hand and grabbed Emperor God Ru Yi's spirit in his hand. Then he crushed it. The supreme celestial emperor who had once ruled over the vast lands of the central region had fallen here without a sound. Chapter 33:65. Do you dare to kill me? Pan Tian's words confused the soldiers on both sides. In truth, they had no idea what was the root cause of this war. It was just that there were layers of pressure from above, forcing them to rush to the battlefield and attack the Fortune Divine Dynasty. However, no one knew what exactly happened between the higher-ups. Only Yi Shiwen, who had flown out of the Good Fortune Heavenly Palace, knew what had happened. Coiling Sky's supremacy wasn't alone. He represented all the heavenly venerables in the world. There wasn't a single heavenly venerable who didn't want a piece of the pie after the creation of the Good Fortune Key. This was the ambition of all the Empyreans in the world. This was where his confidence came from. Yi Shiwen wasn't a match for the heavenly venerables like Good Fortune Heavenly Venerables. So, he wouldn't be a match for all the heavenly venerables of the world with his current cultivation. The Fortune Divine Dynasty's several heavenly venerables also felt the same way. Would they dare to go against the world? They might not care about the ants of the world, but they couldn't ignore the Empyreans of the world. Why not? Don't think that you can do whatever you want here. Southern Tianzuan smiled coldly. His body seemed to be burning with flames as he released his nomological laws, shocking the world. Ha ha! Holy Lord Nan, it's been many years since we last met. Why are you so stern now? Pan Tianzuan burst into laughter. He laughed so hard that he even bent over. It was a maniacal and morbid laughter. In the end, you've lived like a prince for too long. You don't dare to take a gamble. If I were you, I'd be willing to give a try. If I win, I'll be invincible under the heavens. If I lose, so what? Yi Shiwen couldn't help but be speechless. Whose side is this Pan Tian standing on? Or does he have some deep hatred? Even though he knows that there will be a problem, he still taunts Southern Tianzuan. Impudent. Heavenly Venerate Nan roared with obvious anger on his face. Hee. Pan Tian sneered. Speak. What do you plan to do? If you don't agree, the next time the Fortune Divine Capital is surrounded, it won't be me. Pan Tian naturally knew the reason behind this. He also knew that by doing this, he would definitely offend those people from the Fortune Divine Dynasty. But what could he do? Who asked him to be weak? Since he wasn't strong enough, he could only be used as a spear by others. However, this matter was closely related to him, so he had no choice but to risk it all. How dare you? Heavenly Sovereign Nin seemed to be enraged by Pan Tian Venerate. His body gave off a terrifying fiery glow as he took a step forward. In an instant, he arrived before Pan Tian Venerate and slashed down with the saber in his hand. Saber chi surged and divine light flickered. There was nothing more resplendent in this world. On the other hand, Pan Tianzuan was not to be outdone. His body emitted a terrifying light as he fought against South Tianzuan. As the two celestial sovereigns exchanged blows, the entire world surged. Ordinary people were pressed to the ground, kneeling on the ground, unable to move. Both of them consciously avoided the ordinary people below. Although they did not care about these people, they were still their subordinates and their strength. Naturally, they did not want to lose them in the aftermath of their battle for no reason. Having reached a tacit agreement, the two sides immediately charged into the boundless starry sky. Everyone opened their celestial eyes to see the scene of the battle. The two of them casually waved their hands, and countless planets exploded. The energy of the explosion was used by them to attack their opponents. They could even see the laws appear with their naked eyes, and then the laws were modified. All sorts of strange operation patterns of the laws appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Such a scene would only appear in a battle between Empyreans. If it were just a battle between Empyreans, no matter how large the scale, it would be impossible for the laws to change. This was only the aftermath of the battle between the two sides. No one could see the real core of the battle except for Yishuan. Under the attack of South Tianzuan, Pantheon Tianzuan could be said to be retreating step by step. If it were not for the protection of the Pantheon Palace, he would have already been seriously injured. The strength of both sides was clear at a glance. Pantheon Tianzuan's strength had not recovered and was far from his peak. On the other hand, South Tianzuan was one of the few super powerhouses in the world. He was extremely terrifying. The gap in strength was very obvious. Yishuan was very clear about this. At this moment, he understood why the North, South, East, and West Tianzuan could suppress a region. Not all Tianzuan could rule a region. Among the many Tianzuan, the North, South, East, and West Tianzuan were undoubtedly the cream of the crop. The strength of one of them was enough to suppress the other Tianzuan under their rule, and they could even stop the invasion of foreign Tianzuan. Such strength would be very difficult to understand if one did not see it with their own eyes. At this time, the foreign lifeform army was immediately destroyed by the army of the Fortune God dynasty after losing the leadership of Pantheon Tianzuan. These elites of the Fortune Heavenly Palace, in addition to the army of the Fortune God dynasty that had rushed over from the city, beat the foreign lifeform army that had suddenly invaded the city, and in one breath, they beat back the foreign lifeform army. After losing the support of Pantheon Tianzuan, the huge gap in strength between the two sides was suddenly revealed. Puchi, a huge foreign life form, was torn in half by the hands of a skinny old man from the Fortune God dynasty. It didn't even have time to scream before its soul was destroyed. This old man looked extremely old, but he was extremely terrifying. He could destroy these powerful foreign life forms with just a wave of his hand. And there were not just one or two old men like this. On the contrary, there were many of them. These old fellows who looked old and frail were more ferocious than the last. They could tear their Tao, tear God Kings, tear quasi-emperors, and even tear emperor-level life forms apart with their hands. After all, they were also emperor-level life forms. This was the true foundation of the Fortune God dynasty. Yishuan followed such a frenzy and joined in the slaughter of the foreign life forms. He didn't reveal too much of his strength, but he still slaughtered the foreign life forms with astonishing efficiency. He chased the foreign life forms all the way to the city walls of the Fortune God capital, and then followed these foreign life forms out of the Fortune God capital. After leaving the Fortune God capital, Yishuan was unstoppable. He easily penetrated the defense line of the foreign life form army, and no one could stop him. At this time, the battle between the two incomparably powerful existences in the boundless starry sky had finally come to an end. Pantheon Tianzuan's entire defense system had collapsed. Even though he had reversed the laws in an attempt to protect himself, it was still useless. His entire arm had been chopped off by South Tianzuan's saber. Raging flames burned where the wound was. As long as these flames were still burning, it would be impossible for Pantheon Tianzuan to regrow his arms. It wouldn't be easy to get rid of these flames. This was also a serious injury to a Tianzuan. Hurry up and get lost with your people. This arm will be the price for invading the Fortune God capital. South Tianzuan said coldly. He sheathed his saber and didn't pursue Pantheon Tianzuan any further. Just as Pantheon Tianzuan had said, South Tianzuan didn't dare to kill him because he represented all the emperor-level life forms in the world. Killing Pantheon Tianzuan would be equivalent to shedding all pretense of cordiality with the other Tianzuan. Even the Fortune God dynasty wouldn't have the guts to do so now. However, even if he couldn't kill Huang Xiaolong, it didn't mean that Heavenly Venerate Nen would let him off easily. It was impossible for him to do so. An arm and a heavy injury were the price that Pantheon Tianwang had to pay for offending the Fortune God dynasty's dignity. Pan Tianzuan naturally had to bear the consequences on behalf of the other Tianzuan. However, since he had shown himself, this was inevitable. South Tianzuan also knew that Pan Tianzuan would gain a lot of benefits from this matter. It was enough to deceive hot-blooded youths with a few big words, but it was impossible to deceive a powerful old antique like Pan Tianzuan who had once ruled an entire domain. Hee, I will definitely repay you for what you did today in the future, Pan Tianzuan sneered. Although this was the price that he had to pay, he wasn't someone who would resign himself to adversity. This was something that he had firmly engraved in his heart. Let's talk about it when that day comes. I didn't take you seriously in the past, let alone now. South Tianzuan's expression was still indifferent. He didn't take Pan Tianzuan's threat to heart. This is no longer your era. After saying this, South Tianzuan turned around and directly returned to the Fortune God capital. Pan Tianzuan only sneered and then disappeared into the starry sky. From a beginning to the end, the other Tianzuan heavenly venerables didn't show up. In contrast, the foreign Tianzuan heavenly venerables that had come with them also didn't show up. In the end, both sides didn't choose to shed all pretenses of cordiality, and a final battle didn't break out. With the Fortune God capital as their backing, the foreign Tianzuan heavenly venerables wouldn't be able to break into the Fortune God capital and defeat the Tianzuan heavenly venerables of the Fortune God dynasty. Although the Fortune God dynasty's Tianzuan heavenly venerables were powerful, they weren't willing to shed all pretenses of cordiality and go against the Tianzuan heavenly venerables behind Pan Tianzuan. Even though the Fortune God capital had suffered great damage and directly damaged the Fortune God dynasty's dignity, it wasn't worth it to become a lone wolf. However, the common soldiers of the foreign Tianzuan heavenly venerables and the Fortune God dynasty finally breathed a sigh of relief. This nightmarish battle of corpses and seas of blood had finally ended. In this battle, both sides had suffered heavy casualties. Corpses piled up like mountains, and blood flowed like rivers. It was unknown how many elites had died. Moreover, the battle had been inexplicable. It was a mission that the higher-ups had assigned to them, and they hadn't been mentally prepared for it at all. Therefore, when the battle was confirmed to be over, everyone stopped fighting at the same time and retreated separately, especially the foreign Tianzuan heavenly venerables army. They fled back to the transmission array to avoid being surrounded and destroyed by the Fortune God dynasty's army. Chapter 3366. An earth-shattering war that had besieged the Fortune Divine dynasty had ended anticlimactic. Most of the foreign creatures that had besieged the Fortune Divine dynasty had retreated alive, and not all of them had perished. This was already out of everyone's expectations. Then, a great battle between heavenly venerables broke out. As the top experts, the battle between the two sides had directly destroyed a galaxy. In the end, Pan Tian was seriously injured, and one of his arms had been chopped off. Under normal circumstances, if they had attacked the Fortune Divine capital, the people would have been plunged into an abyss of misery and suffering. Even heavenly venerables falling would be child's play. However, in reality, that didn't happen at all. Everything came and went in a hurry, leaving many people confused and baffled. However, it was also a fact that the number of casualties had exceeded 1 million. These are not ordinary living beings, but Tao-confirming realm experts and above. As for ordinary living beings, there wasn't even a record of them. Moreover, this was only a short siege. At this time, some knowledgeable people finally understood why the Fortune Divine dynasty had always exercised restraint, even though there were many expeditions between the foreign worlds and the Fortune Divine dynasty. That was because once a real battle broke out, the casualties would be disastrous. At that time, it wouldn't just be 1 million, but tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of top experts would fall. No one would be able to bear such a loss. After all, this wasn't the chaotic era of the ancient times. At that time, regardless of whether they could fight or not, they had to fight for their own survival. And now, the Fortune Divine Dynasty was in the center of the fortune world. With a place to live, they naturally didn't have the thought of risking their lives like before. However, what made many knowledgeable people tremble with fear was that even though the foreign world's creatures had directly invaded the Fortune Divine capital, other than the direct subordinates of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, there was not a single reinforcements. This in itself was very strange. Given the distance between the Fortune Divine Dynasty's territories, it was normal for the main forces to arrive later. However, it was only a matter of minutes for the top experts to arrive. Not to mention, there were transmission arrays all over the Fortune Divine Dynasty. As long as one was willing to pay a certain price, the distance wasn't a problem. Without all the transmission arrays in the Fortune Divine Dynasty, even if the various heavenly venerables were omnipotent and powerful, it would be impossible for them to truly control this vast land. That was simply impossible. Many people didn't dare to think too deeply about what this meant. The Fortune Divine Dynasty ruled the world not only by its tyrannical strength, but also by the fact that the forces under its rule obeyed its orders. Even the powerful forces and super sects under the Fortune Divine Dynasty's rule had sent their disciples to serve in various departments and places. It could be said that they had completely integrated with the Fortune Divine Dynasty, helping each other, and at the same time, hindering each other at the same time. However, many people were well aware that these powerful forces, super sects, and other local tycoons were the Fortune Divine Dynasty's important helpers. On the other hand, if they betrayed the Fortune Divine Dynasty, chaos would descend upon them in an instant. In the current Fortune Divine Dynasty, human life was no different from grass, but once the world of chaos broke out, human life would be less than grass. It would only be a number on the casualty list, and there wouldn't even be a proper name. In the current Fortune Divine Dynasty, human life was nothing more than grass, but once the world of chaos broke out, human life was less than grass. It would only be a number on the casualty list, and there wouldn't even be a proper name. How terrifying was that? Many people tried their best to avoid it. Once it happened, the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty would return to the chaotic scene of the fortune world many years ago. Every living being was in a precarious situation, and even the top 10 forces were on tenterhooks, as if they could be exterminated at any time. At that time, there were no rules. All the rules were summed up in one sentence. The one with the harder fist was the strongest, and the strong would eat everything. The Fortune Divine Monarch's appearance swept away such a chaotic world and set the rules, giving the various forces the opportunity to reproduce and live. There was no need to tremble in fear, knowing that there would be no tomorrow. In many people's eyes, since the Fortune Divine Dynasty had repelled the alien creature's army, the next step was to reorganize the Fortune Divine Dynasty's internal affairs. This time, all the forces had collectively resisted the Fortune Divine Capital's order and did not send any reinforcements. This was a clear indication of their attitude. According to the Fortune Divine Dynasty's usual unyielding style, they would most likely uproot all of them. In the past, at the most serious time, the eradication of a single strong force was already an earth-shattering matter, resulting in countless casualties. The current top 10 forces did not exist since ancient times, especially during the early Fortune God Dynasty's era. There were many people who were dissatisfied with the current top 10 forces, and after the Fortune Heavenly Monarch's departure, many people were tempted to make a move. There is no lack of people from the top 10 forces and super sections. Facing these restless forces that obeyed orders from that time onwards, the Fortune Divine Dynasty had only one attitude, and that was to annihilate them. No matter how many people were involved or how powerful the forces were, all of them had to be annihilated. Since the establishment of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, the so-called top 10 forces and super forces had changed wave after wave, and the only force that had not fallen was the Fortune Divine Dynasty's central force. Precisely because of this, the Fortune Divine Dynasty's rule was as stable as Mount Tai, because no one dared to oppose it, not to mention joining forces with the alien creatures to go against the central force. This was simply a capital offense. If it was during normal times, the Fortune Divine dynasty would annihilate a clan or a sect if it was involved. There was no room for negotiation, and there was no need to think too much. However, the current situation was incomprehensible because it was not just one sect or clan that was involved, but all the famous forces and super forces under the heavens had joined in. They did not know what was the reason behind this. They only saw the various forces' actions against the central force, and did not even send any experts or troops to deal with the situation. In other words, this time, it was clear that they were going to go against the central force, and they weren't even afraid of the central force finding out. In other words, they wanted to let the Fortune Divine dynasty know their attitude. What was the point of threatening the central force? From the beginning to the end, there was something strange about this matter. From the Fortune Divine capital's sudden activation of the Fortune Chaos Origin Grand Array, to the foreign forces' surprise attack on the Fortune Divine capital, and then the various forces' resistance against the Fortune Divine dynasty's central force. They couldn't understand the situation at all. Could it be that chaos was really coming? Many people were afraid, but no one knew what the Fortune Divine dynasty would do. If it was just one sect or one race, or even the top 10 forces rebelling together, they probably wouldn't be able to defeat the Fortune Divine dynasty. Since ancient times, such a huge rebellion had occurred, but they were all suppressed by the Fortune Divine dynasty. In front of the Fortune Divine dynasty's foundation, only death awaited those who dared to resist. But now, the whole world was silently confronting the central force. Would the Fortune Divine dynasty turn hostile and kill them? Many people were anxiously waiting for the news, afraid that they would accidentally hear the news of the Fortune Divine dynasty mobilizing troops to annihilate the various forces. While they were trembling with fear, the big shots who knew the reason for this matter were as clear as a mirror. This matter ended here. The Fortune Divine dynasty had compromised. If they hadn't compromised, it wouldn't have been just cutting off one of Pantheon's arms, but he would have been left there forever. At that time, it was possible that Heavenly Venerate Nan alone could suppress the Pantheon sovereign to the point where he couldn't even breathe. Not to mention that the other Heavenly Venerates were also present at the Fortune Divine capital. If they really wanted to deal with him, the Pantheon sovereign wouldn't be able to escape even if he grew wings. Since Pantheon had retreated unscathed, it meant that the Fortune Divine dynasty had made a promise to the world's heavenly venerables and made a concession. This matter could be considered to have come to an end. Seeing that the Fortune Divine dynasty had finally made a concession, the various forces and sects that had been secretly plotting this plan finally heaved a sigh of relief. How could they not be worried about going against the Fortune Divine dynasty? They were very strong, but it was also because of this that the Fortune Divine dynasty's terror was highlighted. Many of their clans and sects' disciples had joined the Fortune Divine dynasty, so they were well aware of the Fortune Divine dynasty's strength. The Fortune Divine dynasty was a colossal beast crawling in the fortune world. If the Fortune Divine dynasty refused to compromise, it would be the arrival of a super chaotic era. Even if they joined forces, they wouldn't dare to say that they could defeat the Fortune Divine dynasty. If they weren't careful, they would be annihilated. If it wasn't for the fact that they were forced into a dead end and insisted on obtaining the key of good fortune, they wouldn't have taken this step. The future and destiny of their race were important, and so was their cultivation. The two were inseparable. If they really fought, they couldn't care about anything else. Fortunately, the Fortune Divine dynasty had made a concession this time. However, they were well aware that this matter had already made the Fortune Divine dynasty vigilant. Since these people could join forces to resist the Fortune Divine dynasty once, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't do it again. Although everyone knew that the possibility of it happening again was very small, because it was impossible to find another matter that could make so many heavenly venerables go crazy and join forces. But with the Fortune Divine dynasty's unyielding style, they would inevitably face suppression in the future. This was inevitable, but this was also the price they had to pay for this matter. Compared to the worst-case scenario of fighting, this was nothing. At most, they would have to lay low for countless years to ease the fortune divine dynasty's wariness. At this time, in Xian Yuan's dimensional space, Yi Shiwen, who was sitting and discussing Tao with Xian Yuan, suddenly opened his eyes and said, "This matter is finally over." After a while, Xian Yuan seemed to have received the news and said, "This task is finally over." Chapter 3367. This task is finally over. Fortunately, you cooperated. Otherwise, things would have been even more troublesome. Xian Yuan looked at Yi Shiwen and said, during his original rainy season, Yi Shiwen would not have given in so easily. There would have been another huge battle. However, he did not expect that Yi Shiwen would not have made a move, allowing him to complete this task very easily. Originally, Yi Shiwen was also a part of the plan. No one expected that he would become a celestial master at this time. The last person to become a celestial master was the sky-devouring Monster King. However, the sky-devouring Monster King had just become a celestial master and had not had time to integrate into their circle before he was killed by Yi Shiwen. An Emperor Lord had counterattacked and killed a celestial venerable. This had caused an uproar in the circle of celestial venerables. This was a huge taboo. The dignity of a celestial venerables couldn't be violated. No matter what camp they originally belonged to, they were all the same on this issue. Many people had the idea of teaching Yi Shiwen a lesson. However, they did not expect that Yi Shiwen had already entered the celestial master realm before they could make a move. Some top experts took advantage of this opportunity to attack Yi Shiwen. However, even if they attacked, there was still no way to stop him from becoming a celestial master. In the end, he still became a celestial master. Xian Yuan looked at Yi Shiwen's eyes and could not help but sigh. He really did not know whether he was lucky or unlucky. He was said to be unlucky because he had offended all the celestial venerables when he was still a sovereign emperor. Although it wasn't an unforgettable hatred, he had offended all the sovereign emperors in the world in one go. That was really sad. Even if only a small portion of them wanted to deal with him, he definitely wouldn't be able to live. Just the heavenly tribulation of a celestial master was dangerous enough. If they could not kill him, how could they show off the means of the celestial masters? However, he was lucky because when he was crossing the heavenly tribulation, the divine capital of creation was besieged. Although it seemed to be a matter of a small corner of the world, in fact, it involved all the celestial masters in the world. Everyone was paying attention to the outcome of the battle. Because if he was not careful and angered the fortune divine dynasty's several grand empyreans, then the result would be an earth-shaking, earth-shattering scene. Who knew how many forces and sects would be uprooted? It could be said that the people were plunged into misery and suffering. Fortunately, they managed to avoid that kind of catastrophe in the end. However, they had also missed Yi Shiwen's heavenly master's tribulation. Yi Shiwen had been ambushed and killed by 3 heavenly masters at the last moment. However, it was already considered as a small number. He had offended all the heavenly masters in the world. In the end, only 3 heavenly masters had found an opportunity to attack him. This was already his fortune. If it weren't for the fact that the heavenly venerables had besieged the fortune divine capital, those heavenly venerables would have attacked one after the other. They might even have resorted to some forbidden methods. Yi Shiwen would die no matter how strong he was at that time. He was just an emperor lord no matter how strong he was. There was still a huge gap between him and those celestial masters who were unimaginably powerful. Yi Shiwen took a sip of wine and didn't speak. Ever since he had entered the heavenly master realm, he had understood many things. Especially after the conversation with Xian Yuan, he had learned a lot of common knowledge about heavenly masters. Like the sovereign emperor realm, the heavenly venerate realm was also divided into 9 realms, and he was currently at the peak of the first realm. Ordinary heavenly masters who had just entered this realm were far less powerful than Yi Shiwen. It could be said that if they had completed the tribulation at the same time, Yi Shiwen's strength would have been enough to easily kill the heaven-devouring Demon King. The difference in strength between the two sides was huge. Given Yi Shiwen's strength, he was invincible even in the first realm. He had made preparations for the tribulation and accumulated skills. After the tribulation, they had completely transformed into his foundation. However, even so, he was still at the bottom of the heavenly venerables. Hence, he didn't force himself to break free and compete with Xian Yuan. Even he couldn't see through Xian Yuan's strength. He only felt that it was unfathomable. It wasn't a situation where he had to fight with his life on the line. Naturally, he wouldn't force himself to fight because there was no need at all. It's only the first realm. There's still a long way to go. Not to mention, there's still the legendary fate creation Heaven Lord. What realm is he at, and how strong is he? Yishuan's heart was also filled with endless curiosity. The closer he got, the more he could feel the dreadfulness of the legendary Lord of Good Fortune. Not to mention anything else, he still hadn't figured out many mysteries of the Good Fortune universe palm. In other words, he still couldn't display it with his current cultivation. It's convenient for others and convenient for ourselves. Yishuan finally opened his mouth and said slowly, "Good, well said. It's convenient for others and convenient for ourselves." However, those people from the Fortune God dynasty have obviously lost their minds. It's not that they don't understand this principle, but that they've lost their minds. Do they think they're the fate creation Heaven Lord? Xian Yuan said with a smile, "If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. If there's anything in the future, feel free to look for me. However, I might not be able to find you. I've been traveling the world all these years and have no fixed residence. The next time we meet, it'll be fate if something big happens. Taoist Xian Yuan, please wait. There's a question I've always wanted to ask." Yishuan suddenly stopped Xian Yuan and said, "What's the matter? Just say it. If I can do it, I won't refuse." Xian Yuan said, "I want to ask Xian Yuan about a person. Does Taoist Xian Yuan know about Divine Lord Sky Fire?" Yishuan asked. His current understanding of the heavenly lords could be said to be almost blind. He only knew the names of the East, South, West, and West heavenly lords, as well as the space-time heavenly lord. However, apart from these names, he actually knew too little. There were very few records of the human race in this regard. Firstly, the history of the human race was still shallow. Secondly, the human race had always been a second-rate race and had never reached such heights. Therefore, many things were not even qualified to be heard of. Divine Lord Sky Fire had always been a thorn in his heart, especially during the tribulation transcendence when he suddenly jumped out of his body. In any case, he was indeed a powerful opponent. Even though he had now entered the Heavenly Lord realm, he still did not dare to take Divine Lord Sky Fire lightly. Moreover, he did not even know the specific details of Divine Lord Sky Fire. What qualifications did he have to take him lightly? Him? Why? Is there any grudge between the two of you? Xian Yuan could not help but ask. Yishuan took a sip of aged wine and said, "He wants me to surrender and be his slave. Do you think this counts as a grudge? Well then, I don't care about the grudge between the two of you." Xian Yuan could not help but curl his lips. As a heavenly lord, he naturally knew what kind of grudge this was. Heavenly lords were the rulers of the world. Even if there was a gap in cultivation, their statuses were equal. Now that Divine Lord Sky Fire wanted Yishuan to be his slave, there was nothing more to say. They would fight to the death. However, I can tell you that you can't beat him. Although he is not at his peak now, you definitely can't beat him. Xian Yuan's expression was rare. He is in the heaven-breaching fortress. When he comes out of the heaven-breaching fortress, he will come to trouble you. Although Xian Yuan did not know what the grudge between the two was, he also knew that if Yishuan was still an emperor, there was still room for reconciliation between the two. If there were other heavenly lords involved, they could let go of this grudge and protect Yishuan. Then, this matter could be resolved. However, Yishuan had now entered the heavenly lord realm. Divine Lord Sky Fire's request was a humiliation to his soul. It would inevitably end in a fight to the death. Yishuan was actively preparing to kill Divine Lord Sky Fire. Even if Divine Lord Sky Fire did not know about it, he would definitely have the idea of eliminating the root of the problem. When he came out of the heaven-breaching fortress, It would be a huge battle between the two sides. Others could not interfere in the grudge between the two heavenly lords. They could not afford to interfere in this grudge. At that time, only fate could decide their life and death. Moreover, judging from the current situation, Yishuin was definitely not a match for Venerable Skyfire. Even if he had created one miracle after another, in the face of such an old monster that had existed for countless years, no matter how many miracles he had created, they would all be erased in the face of time and disappear completely. Heaven-breaching fortress? What heaven-breaching fortress? Yishuin was expressionless. With his shrewdness, naturally, he would not casually show his thoughts on his face. Moreover, this was also within his expectations, so it was not the worst-case scenario. Didn't I mention before that because of the loss of the Fate Key, we can no longer receive the support of the Fate Chi? Everyone has been swept down by a heaven lock, swept to below the fourth realm. As long as they are still in the Fate realm, no matter what cultivation they have, they will be the same. Xian Yuan said, and to break through to the fourth realm, this is called the heaven-breaching fortress. Those who you have seen trapped in the path of fate, or those who tried to reforge the Fate Key, in the end, they all wanted to break through the heaven-breaching fortress and return to the cultivation above the fourth realm. It's just that some succeeded and some failed, Xian Yuan said slowly. So, someone has succeeded in breaking through the heaven-breaching fortress? Yishuin said calmly, although he hoped that no one could break through the heaven-breaching fortress, because that would be the most advantageous for a latecomer like him. Compared to these terrifying heavenly lords, what he lacked the most was time. If he was given another 1,000,000 years so that he could stand on the same starting line as those heavenly lords, he would have nothing to fear. However, the heavens would not always be so perfect, and there were not so many things in the world that went smoothly. He had already guessed that someone had already broken through the heaven-breaching fortress, and even without the help of the Fate Key, he had broken through the heaven-breaching fortress. Chapter 3368. In the myriad worlds, there were also restrictions. For countless years, apart from a few people who became emperors by relying on the opportunities left by Emperor Hunyuan, no one could break the seal and become emperors. However, there were always exceptions. Now that Emperor Qin had broken the restriction, he forcefully tore through the seal and achieved Tao. Even in the myriad of worlds, there were people who could do it, not to mention in the fortune realm. Furthermore, according to Xian Yuan, the heaven-breaching pass was just breaking through a layer of seal and reaching the level that he had once reached. No matter how difficult it would not be harder than achieving Tao under the seal. Xian Yuan said, of course, many years have passed since the Heaven Gate tribulation. It is not surprising that someone has broken the Heaven Gate. After all, it did not start from scratch. It seems that Taoist Xian Yuan has already broken the Heaven Gate long ago, Yishuin said. Although it was a question, his tone was extremely certain. Otherwise, with Xian Yuan's strength, he would not have felt so unfathomable. Xian Yuan looked at Yishuin with a faint smile on his face, and then said, it doesn't matter whether they break through or not, because the Fortune God dynasty has already compromised. Next, the Good Fortune Key will appear, and there will no longer be a shortage of Good Fortune Chi. At that time, there will be a large-scale breakthrough tide. Those people have been holding back for a long time, especially those from the Fortune God dynasty. Once they break through, this world will once again be filled with carnage. He did not answer directly, but Yishuin already understood what he meant. Xian Yuan had probably broken the Heaven Gate, and should have done so long ago. What he said was also a heavy pressure for Yishuin. He was only at the first realm. Even the heavenly masters who had been swept away were at the peak of the third realm. Once they broke the Heaven Gate, they would quickly enter the fourth realm and the fifth realm. The foundation that they had accumulated for a long time could be completely unleashed in the shortest time possible. For them, this was the most disadvantageous situation for Yishuin. The longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be. However, he had no other choice. Fortunately, after his incarnation returned, He could rely on the creation Xian pills to completely enter the second realm and quickly reach the peak of the second realm. Moreover, his incarnation could also attempt to transcend the tribulation, which meant that he would have another helper and a backup plan. Although Xian Yuan didn't answer him directly, he still gave Yi Shiwen an important piece of information. Divine fire was in the heaven-breaching pass. In other words, he was still at the peak of the third realm. This gave Yi Shiwen enough information. Regarding divine venerate Skyfire's strength, he was no longer completely clueless. However, the worry in his heart didn't lessen. Instead, it increased. Originally, no one knew whether Hierarch Skyfire could break through the Heaven Gate. Although according to Xian Yuan, some people should have already broken through the Heaven Gate, but it shouldn't be that easy. Otherwise, why would they use the Fortune Key? Not to mention, because of this matter, they almost caused both sides to suffer heavy losses. However, with the Creation Key, it wouldn't be easy to break through the Heaven Gate. Compared to before, when the chances were small, the chances were much higher now. However, there wasn't much time left for him. He didn't even know if he would hear the news that Hierarch Skyfire had entered the fourth realm and broken through the Sky Gate the next day. The only good news was that he had already entered the Heavenly Venerate realm and was no longer as powerless as he had been in the past. Back then, just a little bit of divine venerate Skyfire spirit had forced him to wholeheartedly resist and forcibly suppress it. Anyway, with your current strength, you shouldn't be a match for divine venerate Skyfire. It's best to avoid him. Consider this as giving me face by not fighting him. Let me give you a piece of advice. At this time, Xian Yuan finally sighed and said, "Your talent is indeed outstanding among the people I have seen. You have also repeatedly created miracles. No one knows how far you could develop in the future. It would be a pity if such a fun person like you died too early. Thank you for your reminder. I will pay attention." Yi Shiwen nodded and said, "Then I will leave. See you again if fate allows it." Xian Yuan said and disappeared into the void. The space he had used to seal, Yi Shiwen also disappeared without a trace. Yi Shiwen sighed slightly. He felt as if his whole body was full of strength. Everything was different now that he had entered the Heavenly Master Realm. He didn't have to worry about many things, but he couldn't be truly unscrupulous either. There were too many existences in this world that he couldn't afford to offend. Xian Yuan had blocked him. Although he couldn't move, on the other hand, it had also provided him with an excellent excuse. When the time came, even if the Fortune God dynasty blamed him, he would have enough reason to do so. At his level, as long as he had this reason, it was enough. With this thought in mind, he took a big stride forward and flew in the direction of the human race's holy land, Mount Buzhou. Although they had experienced the invasion of foreign creatures, the foreign army didn't attack each place one by one. Instead, they were directly transported to the Fortune God's capital. Therefore, although the eastern region was the first line of defense, it wasn't affected at all. Many people in remote places didn't even know what had happened. They could only find out what had happened in the Fortune God dynasty through legends. The consequences this time were very serious. The aftermath was still shaking. Many people didn't expect that such an unforeseen event would happen in their lifetime. While the various forces breathed a sigh of relief, they were also secretly mobilizing their forces to guard against the Fortune God dynasty's sudden attack. This was not impossible. Moreover, with the Fortune God dynasty's strength, if they gathered all of their forces, they could easily annihilate one or two super forces, or even the top 10 forces. It was precisely because of this terrifying strength that everyone had no choice but to secretly join forces to resist the Fortune God dynasty. On the surface, the entire Fortune God dynasty gradually calmed down. However, the undercurrents surging in the dark were more intense than before. Everyone was waiting for this matter to pass. While the undercurrents were surging in the Fortune God dynasty, there was another major event in the entire eastern region. That was the human race's supreme emperor, Martial Emperor, had stepped into the heavenly venerable realm, becoming a true, revered martial artist. He had become another supreme overlord in the eastern region. Although many people had already expected it, they were still caught off guard when it really happened. Thinking about it, not many years ago, the heaven-devouring, monstrous emperor had only just stepped into the heavenly exalted realm. Originally, he had thought that he would be able to establish another dynasty and allow the heaven-devouring monstrous clan to become the 11th strongest clan. Furthermore, the heaven-devouring monstrous clan possessed a sufficient foundation. Although they could only be considered to be at the bottom of the rankings, even after becoming the 11th strongest clan, it remained that they were a first-rate colossus in the world. Who would have thought that the heaven-devouring monstrous tribe wouldn't be happy for long before Yi Shiwen slapped them in the face? The supreme heavenly venerable that they were so proud of was actually killed by Yi Shiwen. This news still shook the eastern region. An emperor slaughtering a heavenly venerable was something that only existed in the imagination. It was impossible for such a thing to happen in reality. However, Yi Shiwen had actually accomplished such a thing. How could everyone not be astonished? However, before this matter was over, the divine capital of fortune was surrounded. This was something that happened in the end. For the eastern region, it didn't have much of an impact. In particular, colossus like the heavenly Taoism didn't take any action. Instead, they bided their time. Therefore, the forces that were affiliated with them didn't send any troops to help either. As a result, the entire eastern region was actually in a state of tranquility. At this time, when the news that Yi Shiwen had stepped into the heavenly venerable realm spread, it instantly set off a huge uproar, just like a huge stone thrown into a calm lake. In their eyes, Yi Shiwen had simply become a legend, a miracle. In reality, he had killed the heaven-devouring monstrous emperor as an emperor. Not to mention that he had directly stepped into the heavenly venerable realm. In the eyes of those who were observant, this news only made them tremble with fear. In particular, many of them had watched Yi Shiwen grow up. A long time ago, with Yi Shiwen's strength, no matter how big of a commotion he had caused, it would be difficult for them to pay attention to him. But now, Yi Shiwen's every move was enough to make them tremble with fear. They had no choice but to take him seriously. This was the gap between them. In particular, they saw that Yi Shiwen had already become a heavenly venerable in a short period of time. Many people were even more frightened because these people had more or less offended the human clan or Yi Shiwen. Now, they only felt that the sky had collapsed and the earth had collapsed. Everyone was talking about it. In particular, the human clan had already risen strongly. Originally, some people thought that he was not afraid of indigestion after swallowing the land of 7 prefectures in one go. Moreover, he had swallowed the original 4 prefectures by force. The human clan was not prepared at all. They didn't have any foundation, so it was impossible for them to defend it. This was also the general opinion of many people. Without exception, those who had more than 10 prefectures were existences at the level of the top 10 strongest clans or supersections. The human clan was far inferior in comparison. But now it was different. Yi Shiwen had stepped into the heavenly venerable realm. The human clan had become the 11th strongest clan, which was the most important guarantee. That was, there must be a heavenly venerable to oversee the situation. Once this condition was met, any accumulation of time and any foundation could be slowly increased. While everyone was talking about it, Yi Shiwen returned to Buzhou's sacred mountain. The human clan had held a grand event. Invitations flew directly to large and small forces in the eastern region, like snowflakes. Although the words were quite polite, everyone could smell that there was no room for doubt in it. Chapter 3369. In the East region, all the major forces and powerful clans had basically received this invitation. Even the Silver Moon clan, which was the only one of the 10 strongest clans in the East region, as well as the Sky Dao sect, which ruled the world, and even the Eastern Heavenly Venerate Manor had received such an invitation. Looking at this invitation, everyone knew that in this vast land of the Eastern Domain, another extremely powerful figure was about to appear. He was also going to spread his influence throughout the entire Eastern Domain. Unlike the heaven-devouring Demon King, Yi Shiwen's influence was stronger and more terrifying. Although the heaven-devouring demon king was powerful, it had already been swallowed by the human race. The heaven-devouring demon king was killed by Yi Shiwen, who was only a peak emperor lord at that time. The gap between them was not just a little. At this time, the human race naturally had some ulterior motives since they dared to hold such a grand celebration. However, no matter what, it had already come to this. Naturally, no one dared to disobey, let alone refuse to go. The clan leaders and elders of the major clans began to lead their teams to Buzhou Sacred Mountain. From the day Yi Shiwen attained Dao, Buzhou Sacred Mountain was not only a sacred mountain for the human race, but also a sacred place in the entire eastern region. Not only the leaders and clan leaders of the major clans who had received the invitation, but many people also went to visit the celestial master of their own accord. Not everyone could witness the birth of the celestial master in this life. For them, it was too high and mighty, so they came to pay a pilgrimage. For a time, the attention of the entire eastern region was attracted here. The status and reputation of the human race had also risen. Some people had already publicly announced the title of the 11th strongest clan. As time passed, the title of the 11th strongest clan would become more and more real. Although many people came to pay a pilgrimage of their own accord, the human race still gave them a warm welcome. Since they had announced the title of the 11th strongest clan, they should have the breadth of mind and boldness of a strong clan. As for causing trouble, that was even less of a concern for them. What a joke! There would be many imperial emperors gathered on Buzhou Sacred Mountain, not to mention the fact that there was a supreme celestial lord above all the imperial emperors. Who would dare to act presumptuously in front of the celestial lord? Wouldn't that be seeking death? An empyrean's supreme and great reputation was not inherited, but had relied on one's own strength, one's saber, and one's spear to fight for it. If those people dared to cause trouble, they would be courting death. Therefore, the entire Buzhou Sacred Mountain was extremely busy. All kinds of people walked on the main roads of the mountain. In order to show their respect to the five supremes, those who came on a pilgrimage of their own accord walked up the mountain step by step. It was a good thing that those who came on a pilgrimage were all top-notch experts. Even if they had to walk up step by step, the sacred mountain of Buzhou, which was tens of thousands of meters tall, was not a problem for them. Ordinary people did not have the ability to make a pilgrimage. Traversing a large region was already a miracle for ordinary people. Apart from pilgrims from other clans, there were also pilgrims from the human race. They came from all over the 11 states. Ordinary people did not have such ability, but when they made a great vow to go to Buzhou Sacred Mountain for once in their lifetime, they felt their bodies become much lighter. Their bodies were as light as swallows, and it was not difficult for them to travel thousands of miles in a day or 8,000 at night. Many people understood that it was Yi Shiwen who had helped them. Yi Shiwen had already found out when they made the great ambition, so he had sent down a miracle to help them. Otherwise, with the strength of their legs, they would never have been able to reach Buzhou Sacred Mountain in this lifetime. Although the lifespan of the human race in the Fortune Realm was very long, and they could usually live for more than 100 years, and it was not strange for those who were successful in their cultivation to live for more than 1,000 years. Even so, they would never reach Buzhou Sacred Mountain at their normal speed. Many people were even more grateful for this, and they bowed in the direction of Buzhou Sacred Mountain. Some of the human race pilgrims who were closer had already arrived at the foot of Buzhou Sacred Mountain. They walked up step by step. They came to make a pilgrimage not only because of Yi Shiwen's powerful strength, but also because of Yi Shiwen. During this period of time, the human race could only live in half a state and now ruled over 11 states. This was all because of Yi Shiwen's hard work, so how could they not be grateful? Finally, the day of the celebration arrived. Heroes from all sides gathered on Buzhou Sacred Mountain, and there were already dozens of sovereign emperors. Almost all of them were representatives of powerful clans and sects in the vast eastern region. All the sovereign emperors, quasi-emperors, and divine kings gathered together and toasted one another. No matter what their true forms were, they all took human form. Otherwise, many of their true forms would have been comparable to those of the Bujo sacred mountain, especially the dozens of powerful sovereign emperors. Except for the few sovereign emperors of the human race, almost all of them were 5th realm, 6th realm sovereign emperors, and above. These people were not only the best among all living beings, but also the best among the sovereign emperors. The Silver Moon clan and the Heavenly Tao sect had both sent people here. These were the two strongest forces in the East region. Apart from the Eastern Heavenly Lord Mansion, they were almost the local tyrants, especially the Heavenly Tao sect, who had sent people to kill him in the past. He had sent an invitation to the Heavenly Tao sect, which meant that he would no longer pursue the past matters. He had killed the Imperial Emperor of the Heavenly Tao sect, and, similarly, the Heavenly Tao sect had also chased after him. Now, both sides were written off. He didn't care about it, and he was fearless. However, it was not a good thing to face the Heavenly Tao sect every day for the sake of the human race. This time, the Heavenly Tao sect had also sent a great elder, a 9th realm imperial emperor, to participate in the celebration held by the human race. This was their response to Yishiwen. Both sides had reached a consensus. As Yishiwen had entered the heavenly venerate realm, it was really not worthwhile for both sides to be hostile to each other like before. The Silver Moon clan had also sent people here, which undoubtedly meant that they had truly acknowledged the status of Yishiwen and the human race. In particular, the human race had been called the 11th strongest race by many people. However, it was only a part of the population, and it was not recognized by the old powerful races. Now, they had sent people here, which meant that they had finally acknowledged the status of the human race, or in other words, they had acknowledged Yishiwen's strength. From now on, the human race could become the 4th strongest force in the eastern region, second only to the Eastern Heavenly Lord Mansion, the Heavenly Tao sect, and the Silver Moon clan. This kind of recognition was very important for the human race. It could reduce a lot of obstacles in many matters and developments in the future. This was also the fundamental reason why Yishiwen had held this celebration in such a high-profile manner and finally sent the invitation. He wanted to forcefully force the two races to acknowledge the existence of the human race and to acknowledge the status of the human race. Although the human race's current strength was still a little lacking, and their foundation was also lacking a lot, it was enough for him to have such qualifications and such confidence. Now that everything was within his expectations, he nodded in satisfaction. In the following period of time, it was time for him to cultivate his internal strength. Whether it was him or the human race, they had to cultivate their internal strength in seclusion to prepare for the future. He had already felt that the following situation would not be peaceful as the heavenly venerates had broken through the heavenly barriers. Chapter 3370. The human race announced his rise to power to the entire eastern region during this celebration. Yishiwen also used this opportunity to announce the emergence of another unparalleled heavenly venerate. The entire eastern region situation would also change because of Yishiwen's appearance. After experiencing the siege of the Fortune Divine capital by the foreign armies, the world seemed to have calmed down all of a sudden. Although all sorts of collisions and frictions were still going on, it was undoubtedly calm compared to the previous shock that had shocked the world. In addition, the Fortune realm had been in a turbulent process ever since the path of creation had opened. Now it was finally time for the major forces to calm down and digest their previous gains in peace. In the Fortune Divine capital, the few rulers still hadn't come out of seclusion despite such a major event. They continued to refine the creation key. However, all the heavenly venerates' eyes were fixed on the creation key, waiting for it to come out. Time passed in such a peaceful situation. 5,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. 5,000 years was like a snap of a finger for a heavenly venerate. However, in the human world, it was the replacement of countless generations. Even the races with long lifespans had replaced several generations. The mighty siege of the Fortune divine capital by the foreign armies had become a memory in the minds of the people with the passage of time. It had already become a myth. Over the past several thousand years, the various big powers had already digested a lot of the fruits of their victories. The human clan was no exception to this. The human clan's astonishing reproductive ability had played a huge role at this moment. In 5,000 years, the human clan had already spread throughout the 11 continents. The original heaven-devouring monstrous clan had already become a minority. The majority of the heaven-devouring monstrous clan that had vowed to resist the rule of the human clan had already been eliminated in the past 5,000 years. The remaining ones could only hide in the mountains and forests. They were unable to pose any threat to the human clan. Generally speaking, the strength of the human race had made great progress in the past 5,000 years. Their territory had expanded a lot. In addition to the spoils that Yi Shiwen had brought back from the Fortune divine capital, the human race's strength had increased more than tenfold in the past few millennia. They truly had the foundation and strength to become the 11th strongest race. The voices in the Eastern domain grew louder and louder. During these thousands of years, not only did the overall strength of the human race improve rapidly, but so did the few sovereign emperors. Ren Wang had reached the 5th realm, and Fengyi had reached the 6th realm, only one step away from the 7th realm. Apart from them, the human race finally gained another celestial venerable under the stimulation of large amounts of resources and luck. It was an old quasi-emperor who, after countless accumulations, finally stepped into the sovereign emperor realm and became another sovereign emperor of the human race, spreading out another branch of the human race. Yi Shiwen was also very supportive of this idea. The stronger the strength of the human race was, the more benefits it would bring him. It would also be an extremely powerful backing. After his tribulation, Yi Shiwen asked Bian Xiaoye to send a congratulatory gift, but he did not come out. Both his original body and incarnation were in closed-door training. His original body was still digesting the previous harvest, striving to step into the 2nd realm in one fell swoop. Although he knew that there was not much time, he also knew that it could not be rushed. He was like a high-rise building that had already reached the clouds. At this point, if he wanted to go further, he must lay a good foundation. And he had to lay a better foundation. Otherwise, with his young age, he might not even be able to defeat a celestial venerable of the same realm, not to mention dealing with divine skyfire. Fortunately, he had a lot of harvest in the battle of the Fortune divine capital. These Xian creation pills could save him countless years of hard work, allowing him to catch up with those predecessors at an astonishing speed. And his incarnation was currently comprehending the Tao. No one could walk the same path, not even his incarnation. If he wanted to truly cultivate to the level of his second body, he must comprehend his own Tao. This process might take a long time. Many peak sovereign emperors could not comprehend the heavenly master great way in their lifetime, and thus step into the heavenly master realm. Fortunately, with the lesson learned from Yi Shiwen's mistakes and the mysterious space in his body could also be used by his second body, this process could be greatly shortened. In 5,000 years, besides him, Bian Xiaoye's progress was even faster. She had completely stepped into the quasi-emperor realm. Yi Shiwen had already rewarded her with a Xian creation pill. It would not take long for her to step into the peak quasi-emperor realm, and she would not be afraid of attracting heaven's retribution. Under Yi Shiwen's guidance, although Bian Xiaoye's cultivation time was not very long, her foundation was very solid. Compared to many veteran quasi-emperors who had cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years, she was not inferior. In Yi Shiwen's opinion, according to Bian Xiaoye's cultivation speed, it would not take long for another emperor to appear in the human race. At the same time, she would also be the first empress born in the Fortune realm. Although she would not be the first in the world, even if she was only the first in the human race of the Fortune realm, it was extremely not easy. Yi Shiwen also valued this only disciple of his in the Fortune realm more and more, and handed over many matters to her to handle, especially many matters of the divine court. Although he did not accept any more disciples, Bien Xiaya accepted many registered disciples, and in addition, the most talented disciples of various tribes of the human race came to listen to Yi Shiwen's orders. The elite guards of the divine court were also quite large, and now, all of them were under Bien Xiaoya's management. Fortunately, Bien Xiaoya had tempered herself over the years. Even if this master was a little irresponsible and became a shopkeeper who did not have to do anything, she still held on and handled everything in an orderly manner. Among the younger generation, Bien Xiaoya's reputation had also risen, not only in the human race, but also in the eastern region. In terms of strength, she was still not the best. After all, in terms of cultivation time, she was still too young, not even 10,000 years old. However, her status far surpassed other quasi-emperors of the same generation. Not anyone could become a disciple of a heavenly master. Although it was not rare to become a disciple of a heavenly master, and some heavenly masters accepted many disciples, 8 to 10 personal disciples, and hundreds to 80 registered disciples, this in itself was not rare. But those heavenly masters all had tens of thousands of years of cultivation, and their disciples had either achieved the Tao or become emperors. Even if they did not achieve the Tao, they could not be considered to be in the same generation as her. Therefore, it could be said that among the current younger generation of martial artists, her status was the most precious. In addition, many people liked her very much and were willing to support her. Bien Xiaoya was not old, but her name had already shaken the entire eastern region and even had a great reputation in the entire Fortune Divine dynasty. After all, with her strength, if she was not in the human race or not in a colossus like the divine court, but in an ordinary sect, she could have become a grand elder or even a supreme leader. But because of the relationship between the human race and the divine court, and even Yi Shiwen, she could only be considered as an expert of the younger generation. On this day, Bien Xiaoya had just finished dealing with the miscellaneous items in the divine court. As she walked through the divine court, the disciples who passed by saluted her, and she only nodded slightly. Thousands of years had passed, and Bien Xiaoya was almost 10,000 years old. She was no longer the impatient little girl who had never seen the world. Now, she had the dignity of sect supreme, but with Yi Shiwen above her, there were many problems that she did not need to consider, and she still had the mentality of a little girl. Clear rules had long been established in the divine court, so there were many things that she did not need to deal with personally. She only needed to deal with some important matters from time to time. She had also learned to let go and become a true leader. Now that her master was in closed-door cultivation all year round, she had just come out from it and was considering whether she should go out for a walk, travel around the eastern region, read 10,000 books, and travel 10,000 miles. This was what Yi Shiwen had always told her. She could not be a flower in a greenhouse. Suddenly, at this time, a majestic aura suddenly spread out from the depths of the divine court. Although it was only for a moment, Bien Xiao already sensed that it was her master, the human race's supreme heavenly master, revered marshal. Sure enough, in the next second, there was a flash in front of her, and a figure appeared in front of her. It was her master, revered marshal, Yi Shiwen. However, she instinctively felt that the Yi Shiwen in front of her was a little different. Although she could not tell what was different, she felt that it was a little different and the temperament was a little different. If her original impression of her master was like a majestic sea, vast and endless, then the master in front of her was like an unsheathed sword, sharp and invincible. She could still distinguish this kind of feeling. It was just that that kind of feeling was familiar and a little different, so she was not sure, but she thought that it should be her feeling wrong. After all, the other party was indeed her master, and he flew out from the depths of the divine court. If it was a fake, her master would have killed him long ago, and it was impossible for him to survive. Disciple greets master. Master, may you live forever. Bien Xiaoya quickly said with a big salute. In the distance, the guards of the divine court had already knelt down on one knee in excitement. Many of them had heard many legends about this master since they were young, or even since they were born. Among the many human clans, It was naturally a great honor to be selected to be a member of the divine court. The others were all looking at Ji Hao with envy, jealousy, and hatred, and all of this was because of the man in front of them. Chapter 33:71. Get up, all of you. Yi Shiwen slowly opened his mouth and said. His words seemed to have a mysterious magic power. Everyone couldn't help but stand up after he finished speaking. It wasn't magic power, nor was it magical power. It was just that although his words were gentle, there was an unquestionable majesty in them. Many elite guards showed a bit of excitement on their faces. Yi Shiwen had been in closed-door training for a long time. Many of the previous generations of guards had not actually seen Yi Shiwen in person. In their view, this itself was a kind of supreme glory. How could they not be excited? Just today's experience was enough for them to brag to their descendants for a lifetime. Congratulations on coming out of closed-door training, Master, Bian Xiaoya said after getting up. A pair of beautiful eyes fell on Yi Shiwen. She only felt that although her skills had advanced by leaps and bounds in the past thousands of years, and she had even stepped into the quasi-emperor realm in one go, she still felt unfathomable when facing her master. But after thinking about it, she felt relieved. There was nothing strange about it. In the whole world, only the founders of those super sects and super powerful clans could be comparable to her master who had already stepped into the heavenly master realm. There were not many people in total. Her master was already standing among the small group of rulers in the world. It's good that you're not in closed-door training at this time. It's also fate. I'm going to cross the tribulation. Come with me. It will be very beneficial for you to watch the tribulation. After Yi Shiwen finished speaking, before Bian Xiaoya could figure out why her master, who had just crossed the tribulation thousands of years ago, was going to cross the tribulation again, her figure flashed, and she had already appeared in the endless galaxy of the heavens beyond the heavens. Even an imperial emperor would not be able to achieve such godly speed, let alone a quasi-emperor like her. If she were to fly on her own, she might not even be able to reach the boundless galaxy from Buzhou, Sacred Mountain, even after flying for a month. The sky of the Fortune realm was far higher than the sky of the heavens in the myriad heavens. It was difficult for even quasi-emperors to fly there. If one wanted to cross the galaxy, it would take an unknown amount of time. Only an emperor could cross it, and only a heavenly master could cross it instantly. Time road come. Yi Shiwen stood in the starry sky and waved his hand slightly. Suddenly, a streamer of light broke through the space and turned into a colorful robe. Then, it thoroughly integrated into Bian Xiaoya's body. Bian Xiaoya was somewhat puzzled. She naturally recognized the time magic robe. It had already become Yi Shiwen's signature piece of equipment. However, at this moment, the time robe was not worn by him, but by her. Just what in the world was she trying to do? However, before she could recover from her shock, she immediately sensed a strand of heavenly might that covered the heavens and the earth pressed down upon her. This strand of heavenly might even caused her to feel suffocated. After all, with her current cultivation, she could already be considered as a top figure amongst countless living beings. As far as she was concerned, even overcoming the imperial monarch tribulation wouldn't be to the extent of making her feel suffocated. Moreover, he still had the protection of the time robe. In just a short while, the Milky Way was already densely covered with all kinds of tribulation clouds, all of which had gathered together. Master is going through the heavenly tribulation. Bian Xia couldn't understand why this was happening, but she finally understood at this moment that Yi Shiwen was going through the heavenly tribulation. At this moment, she finally understood why she felt suffocated. With Yi Shiwen's strength, his heavenly tribulation would naturally be 100 times more terrifying than her imperial monarch tribulation. In the face of such a heavenly tribulation, her first reaction was to escape. However, she immediately reacted. Since Master asked her to come, there must be a reason. Moreover, she was wearing the time magic robe, so the heavenly tribulation shouldn't be able to penetrate the time magic robe. Otherwise, Master wouldn't have asked her to observe the heavenly tribulation at such a close distance. However, at the same time, she also began to get excited. Not everyone had such an opportunity to observe a heavenly master's heavenly tribulation at such a close distance. At this moment, she also understood what Yi Shiwen meant when he said that this was also an opportunity for her. This was indeed an opportunity. Observing the entire heavenly tribulation was equivalent to at least tens of thousands of years of cultivation. Even with the comprehension of this time's heavenly tribulation, coupled with the cultivation power of the mysterious creation pill, she would be able to attempt to reach the peak of the quasi-emperor realm in a short time. Looking at Yi Shiwen again, he didn't raise any defensive means, as if he was planning to resist it head-on. Without waiting for her to think too much, lightning fell like a lightning rain, instantly turning the area within a radius of thousands of miles into a huge sea of lightning. Almost in an instant, the flashing lightning covered everything, almost as if it was destroying the world. Bian Xiaoye felt that any one of these lightning could strike her to death at any time. Even though she was already mentally prepared, when the heavenly tribulation fell, she still felt so scared that she almost fainted. Fortunately, the time robe on her body supported a time domain in time. When the lightning fell into the time domain, it was all digested, unable to approach or destroy it. She looked at the lightning in the distance. It was simply terrifying. She had received guidance from Yi Shiwen, so naturally, many of the methods of heavenly tribulation were similar to Yi Shiwen's. She preferred to use the heavenly tribulation to cleanse her body, cleanse her muscles and marrow, so that her physical cultivation could be improved to a higher level. Although Bianxia looked weak on the outside, her great azure physique had long reached the pinnacle of perfection. Within the same realm, it was almost impossible to meet a worthy opponent. However, looking at the sea of heavenly tribulation in front of her, she didn't dare to have such thoughts. If she really had such thoughts, it would undoubtedly be really courting death. Using her physical body to resist such a heavenly tribulation was not cleansing her muscles and marrow, but courting death. Moreover, this was just the aftermath. The real main force of the heavenly tribulation was rushing in Yi Shiwen's direction, and she was only at the edge of the corner, but she could already feel the terrifying scene, as if the world was destroyed. Fortunately, she had the protection of the time robe, and the heavenly tribulation didn't seem to care about such a small thing appearing here. In the heavenly tribulation of this level, Bian Xiaoye couldn't affect anything at all and could only watch from afar. Therefore, Bian simply didn't care and directly sat down cross-legged, then began to open her heavenly eye and began to observe. Because of the appearance of the heavenly tribulation, all the laws that were rarely seen on ordinary days had all emerged, operating in various mysterious ways. Usually, she wouldn't have the opportunity to see the operation of such laws, and the power of the laws had almost been operated to the extreme. Although most of it was very unfamiliar to her, and she couldn't understand it at all, even if she could only understand 1,000th of it, it would still be of great benefit to her now. While desperately absorbing the information about the operation of the laws and the heavenly tribulation, she also kept the mysterious creation pill in her mouth, constantly absorbing the pill chi within, turning it into surging power and complementing the comprehension of the huge amount of information. Not long after, she felt that her strength had directly increased by a level, and she was one step closer to the peak of Quasi-Emperor. She had a hunch that as long as she completely watched the heavenly tribulation, breaking through to the peak of Quasi-Emperor was probably only a matter of time. For her now, she could really consider breaking through to the Emperor realm. And at this moment, and in the middle of the heavenly tribulation, an iron sword had appeared in Yi Shiwen's hand out of nowhere. It was just an ordinary iron sword that could be forged by a blacksmith in a roadside blacksmith shop. But it was such an iron sword that he wanted to use to resist this heavenly tribulation. The lightning of the heavenly tribulation fell on his body, causing his body to emit green smoke. This was his second heavenly master tribulation, although it was his original body previously, and this was only his second incarnation now. it was still considered a piece of cake for him. This was Yi Shiwen's second incarnation. After thousands of years of seclusion, he had finally found his own path and entered the path of the sword, becoming a super terrifying sword emperor. In just a few thousand years, his sword Dao cultivation had directly rushed to the peak of the emperor realm. Of course, this had to do with his original body. Although his original body didn't mainly cultivate the sword Dao, his sword Dao cultivation was enough to make many sword emperors, and sword monarchs feel ashamed, as they couldn't be compared at all. And now, he planned to use the sword Dao to break through the heavenly tribulation and finally become a sword venerable. Compared to when his original body was crossing the heavenly tribulation, he had a much greater advantage now. Although he was walking a completely different path from his original body and couldn't be mentioned in the same breath, his original body's understanding of the heavenly master realm was still extremely precious to him. Therefore, he could use some techniques that were far beyond the peak of the emperor realm. He didn't need any tools to protect himself at all. He dared to compete with heaven and earth with just an iron sword. This was the sword Dao. There was no retreat, and there was an invincible sword Dao. This was also why Bian Xiaoya felt that the second incarnation was more outstanding than the original body. He had just obtained the sword Dao, so it was inevitable that he couldn't control it. When he had just obtained the sword Dao, it wasn't just to this extent. It was like a sword had transformed into a human form, which was completely different from the original body. Although the original body had learned many martial arts, its core was martial arts. It used itself as the core to control many martial arts, which was a kind of miscellaneous path. However, this second incarnation was purely sword Dao. It used its body to serve the sword, was sincere to the sword, and was sincere to the Dao. It only combined itself with the sword. This was the path of the second incarnation. This was completely different. All of his cultivation was concentrated in sword Dao, so he didn't need other help, not even defensive tools. With a sword in hand, he had the world, and with the iron sword in his arms, he was invincible. In this endless lightning tribulation, his sword Dao was pushed to the extreme, and it was unknown how many lightning tribulations were slashed by the iron sword. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.